On the day the zombies arrived, I was shopping in a mall when a zombified lady next to me, her eyes turned pale and her face twisted, suddenly bit me. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself reborn a month before the zombie outbreak. 1. My name is Jade. Inspired by the phrase mountain springs, misty as the morning sun, my parents wanted me to be like a mountain brook, always full and clear, always kind and striving upwards. That's the origin of my name, however. My beloved parents died in a plane crash when I was 14. I grew up alone and isolated until at the age of 22, the year I graduated from university. I had the opportunity to study abroad at University F. I had even booked my plane ticket for the next day, but fate played a cruel trick on me, and I died the day before I was supposed to leave, in a hazy state. I had a long dream about what happened after my death. A zombie virus swept across the globe, erupting almost simultaneously everywhere. Major cities fell one after another, and within a single day, the transportation networks collapsed. Military rescue efforts were almost entirely wiped out as soon as they left their bases. The virus spread at an alarming rate as soon as one person was infected, engulfing the military in waves of zombies. This global disaster continued into its third year. The government gathered the survivors in a remote northern base, barely maintaining safety but having no clue how to eliminate the zombies. Until a girl named Catherine appeared, she discovered that this virus was not a natural disaster but a man-made calamity. It was the result of nefarious human experiments by a doctor named Lee Wren, who had collaborated with officials from Country M to develop this virus as a biological weapon. It was meant to be deployed in various countries, but the agent carrying the virus broke and leaked en route. Worse still, the virus developed resistance to the original antidote. Ordinary drugs couldn't kill it. Dr. Lee and the officials from Country M started to panic, wanting to retract their actions, but the situation had already spiraled out of control. If my world were a novel, I would be just a minor character killed off to illustrate the horror of the zombie virus, while Catherine would undoubtedly be the heroine. She exposed Dr. Lee's crimes, brought him to justice, and found the original drafts of the antidote, eventually. She developed a drug to combat the advanced zombies. Over the course of another year, humans finally eradicated the zombies, and I, inexplicably, died on the very first day of this 4-year apocalypse. Taking a deep breath, I pulled myself out of the memories and looked at my phone. Today was July 14, 2030. I hurriedly scanned the news headlines and after a while, at the very bottom, found a quiet headline about 4 people bitten by a suspected rabies patient in Country M. Dated an hour ago with just over 1,000 views. My hands shook as I held my phone, my fingertips turning white. Then I knew. It wasn't a dream, I had truly been reborn. 2. I immediately rolled out of bed, trembling as I called my mentor to give up the chance to study abroad. Upon hearing this, my mentor's voice soared several pitches, sharply piercing my eardrums. What are you saying? You're not going, Jade. Have you lost your mind? I silently moved the phone away from my ear, then said, Professor, I'm not crazy, I really can't go. After a deep sigh on the other end, my mentor said, Do you realize what you're saying? Just saying I'm not going after all the effort I and you put in to get this opportunity. I don't agree with your decision. I stayed silent for a while, thinking that I couldn't go anyway, and compromised. Okay, I'm sorry, Professor, I got it wrong. I paused, then continued, Teacher, you better not go out recently, stock up on supplies. My mentor grumbled about me studying too hard, suggesting I might need to see a psychiatrist, and then hung up the phone. I knew she didn't believe me, so after some thought, I sent her a serious text message, reminding her to really stock up on supplies. That was all I could do to help her. Putting down my phone, I looked around the room. This duplex apartment, which I had just rented on the 12th, has about 600 square meters spread over 2 floors and is located on the 28th floor. I rented it just for a month. At the time, the landlord was about to sell this apartment and offered me a transitional rental price of 5,000 yuan, not looking to profit from me. It was perfect timing, as I thought I would be going abroad for further studies next month. Wanting to indulge a bit, I took this short-term lease, not expecting that this spur-of-the-moment rental would become essential for my survival. Over the next month, the landlord never came to check on the place. So I confidently called some workers to start renovations. I had arranged for them to come at 3 in the afternoon. Looking at the 60,000 yuan I had earned from part-time jobs over the years and the 500,000 yuan inheritance from my parents, I headed straight to the pharmacy downstairs. I explained to the owner that it was a school purchase before starting to buy excessively. I bought 5 boxes of each type of medicine, regardless of their use. and nearly cleared out their stock of common cold medicines and antibiotics. I also grabbed alcohol and gauze as if they were free, forcing the owner to bring more stock from the warehouse. Eventually, 8 large cardboard boxes were filled, and my account balance dropped by over 40,000 yuan. However, I wasn't too concerned about the expense, as in a month's time, money would be of no use anyway. Yet looking at my account balance, I worried the money might not be enough. I remembered the house my parents left me in City A. It's quite large, but City A will be one of the worst affected areas in the upcoming zombie virus outbreak. It definitely wouldn't be safe to stay there. After some consideration, I decided to sell that house. Its location and floor level were very good, and it could normally sell for over 3 million yuan. In a rush, I could sell it for 2 million yuan, and there would be many eager buyers. I borrowed a cart from the store owner, loaded the 8 large boxes of medicine onto it, and pushed it to the elevator. I then moved them 2 boxes at a time up to the 28th floor. Since it was a weekday morning and the building was mostly occupied by working professionals, I encountered no one. After getting everything upstairs, I quickly listed the basic information of the house in City A on a real estate trading app. Several people contacted me soon after. I insisted on receiving full payment within a week, which deterred many. But there were still many interested parties. Soon enough, someone who could pay 2 million appeared. I refused an invitation to meet in person, telling them I would send the keys and property deed by mail after receiving the payment. I spent a moment thinking, then also listed most of the expensive furniture and decorations online. In my heart, I silently apologized to the landlord, but in the face of the impending apocalypse, no one would need these beautiful things anymore. Soon someone from the platform came to pick up the items. The duplex had a total of 7 rooms, including 4 bedrooms, 2 studies, and a small home cinema, counting the large kitchen, living room, and bathrooms. The total area was huge, enough for me to store supplies for 10 years. I cleared out all the rooms to store goods. I sold the expensive paintings in the living room and even dismantled the crystal chandelier to sell, replacing it with ordinary light bulbs. As I directed the removal of items, I considered future plans for the apartment, and time passed quickly. Watching the increasingly empty space, I felt a sense of fulfillment. An hour later, after all the items were taken away, I excitedly looked at the 400,000 yuan that had come in and went on a shopping spree on a second-hand furniture website. A plush lazy sofa, buy. A fluffy small rug, buy. A large, simple soft bed, buy. Large store shelves, buy 50 of them for storage. I requested urgent delivery, but the earliest they could arrive was tomorrow morning. That's when I realized a serious problem. Where would I stay tonight? Rubbing my temples in resignation, I figured I'd just have to make do with a hotel for the night. With a sigh, I heard a knock at the door. It was the contractor I had scheduled for the morning. I invited him in and began discussing the renovation requirements. After some thought, I said, I want thicker glass, bulletproof, with one-way film, security grills on the outside, a new door, soundproofing panels for the walls, and blackout curtains. The contractor hastily took notes and asked about the details. How thick should the bulletproof glass be? Is 19 millimeters enough? It's the thinnest available. I interrupted him. What's the thickest? He replied, The thickest is 33 millimeters, but let's go with 33 millimeters. I paused, pondering for a moment, and make it double layered. The contractor fell silent for a moment, took a deep breath, and gently suggested, Miss, 33 millimeters is quite thick, and you want it double layered. You don't need that much even for explosions. Plus, glass that thick will significantly reduce the light transmission. Usually, 19 millimeters is sufficient, like what's used in jewelry stores. I waved dismissively. It's fine, just do it, don't worry about it. This must have been a first for the contractor facing a customer like me. He choked up a bit and ended up saying nothing more. During the negotiations, I insisted on the highest level of security for everything, which made the contractor almost too afraid to ask if I was involved in something dubious. I simply explained that my family was concerned about me, a girl living alone, and insisted on high security measures. Seeing the 70mm thick steel door I chose, he fell silent again, for, in any case, the renovation of my house had begun. Meanwhile, I went across the street to enjoy some spicy hot pot, tears streaming down my face from the heat, yet I kept stuffing my mouth. It was just too delicious. I silently vowed to myself to buy not just 100, but 500 packets of this hot pot base. When the apocalypse comes, I'll just stay at home and enjoy hot pot, which would be awesome. That night, I curled up in the hotel bed, shopping on an online platform. I bought rice from different stores to spread out the purchase, ordering 500 pounds from each and only stopping after 4 stores. I also ordered about 800 pounds of flour in total, including cornmeal, buckwheat flour, various beans, and wheat with husks, which last long. I asked the vendors to vacuum pack everything possible. I bought a lot because first, my house is big enough, and second, I'm a person who lacks a sense of security, just in case these supplies suffer from moisture, decay, or pests. I needed to account for that too. I couldn't just buy enough for 4 years. I had to consider potential losses, considering perishable food like fish, shrimp, eggs, and meat with short shelf lives. I only bought 100 pounds. Vegetables have an even shorter shelf life, so I got 50 pounds, all to be delivered by the store in 2 weeks, thinking about sustainable living. I bought various seeds along with fertilizer and soil, so if I wanted fresh vegetables, I could just grow them on demand without worrying about preservation. Next, I focused on canned and snack foods with longer shelf lives. I bought 50 boxes of canned goods, each box containing 12 cans of 500 grams each. I bought fewer snacks with short shelf lives and more of those with longer ones, amounting to several hundred boxes. For seasoning, I started with 5 pounds of onions, ginger, and garlic, which have short shelf lives, but can be grown myself. I bought 20 pounds of Sichuan peppercorns and 50 pounds each of long-lasting staples like salt, sugar, and soy sauce. I also purchased 500 bags of hot pot base and 200 soup stock cubes. There were too many small items. It took me half an hour to finish buying everything. Considering household items, I bought 30 sets of sleepwear for each season, 10 wool blankets, 5 thick down quilts, and 5 light cotton quilts. I purchased 500 boxes of sanitary napkins and toilet paper, 10 boxes of plastic bags, and a variety of household items. I practically selected one of each available. For each shop, I specified a uniform box size and asked them not to print the item details on the shipping labels for a neater appearance and to make it easier to explain to the neighbors. When bombarded with calls from merchants wondering if I had made a mistake with such large quantities, I brushed them off by saying I was stocking up for a store. Having finished my purchases on Taobao, I visited another electronics mall. Solar power generation is the best option, but I considered the potential for damage. Luckily, my home is on the top floor with a rooftop that's generally accepted as part of the top floor by everyone in the community. I calculated that about 6 solar panels would cover the entire roof and meet our electricity needs, to be on the safe side. I bought an extra 6 panels and scheduled a worker to install them tomorrow. I also came across a foot-operated generator and bought one just in case, though I hope I'll never need to use it. I plan to place a water collection bucket on the side of the rooftop, with a retractable rainwater collector above it. This setup will allow me to retract the collector on sunny days so it won't block the solar panels, and extend it on rainy days to collect water, to avoid missing anything. I checked and rechecked the items, finally breathing a sigh of relief. When I looked at the expenses, I had spent a staggering 520,000 RMB. I desperately reassured myself that it was okay since money would be useless in an apocalyptic scenario. However, it didn't stop my heart from bleeding over the fact that I had spent what I would have earned in 80 summer jobs during college. Despite the pain, seeing over 2,000 items ready for shipment in my order history brought me satisfaction. This time, I believe I am well prepared. I am determined to survive until the apocalypse is over and start a brand new life. 5. Apocalypse countdown, 20 days. A week has passed, and I've almost finished purchasing everything I need. Security and property management keep asking what I am buying in such large quantities. I consistently lie that a friend opened a cat litter factory and I'm buying it cheap to resell for a profit. Once again, I appreciate my attention to detail in standardizing the box sizes and having the merchants conceal the product information, which helps me maintain my cover. After all, I'm not just a naive kid. In an apocalyptic world, everyone is for themselves, and the worst in people is often amplified. With virtually no ability to defend myself physically, I must rely on caution to stay safe. While storing the supplies, I was worried about the floor collapsing, so I distributed the heavier items as evenly as possible. After confirming with the property management that our building is structurally sound, I felt relieved and continued to stack the items. After staying in a hotel for a week and returning home to a newly renovated place, I tearfully paid the workers over 400,000 RMB for labor and materials. Who could have imagined that a heavy-duty steel door would cost 200,000 RMB? While arranging the furniture, I placed all my purchases in the living room: a bed, a small sofa, a table, and a carpet, which altogether occupied a small corner of about 20 square meters. The rest of the space was used for storing supplies. I organized the items by type on the shelves and created a chart that listed the quality and shelf life of each product. The sheer volume of items to catalog was overwhelming, and it took me 2 full days to complete. Considering the short shelf life of meat, I thought about breeding animals. I wasn't worried about noise since the soundproofing in my apartment was so effective that it was eerily quiet inside. The question was what animals to raise. Large animals like cows and sheep were out of the question, so I decided on poultry. Chickens were too noisy in the morning, and geese were loud as well. So I opted for relatively quieter looting chickens. Without hesitation, I cleared out a room and bought 3 male and 15 female looting chickens from a farm, along with 1,000 kilograms of feed. When the delivery arrived the next day, I set up the room with fences, and my refuge was finally complete. The decor of the apartment, with its Central European-style wallpaper and iron shelves, might seem mismatched, but the thick tempered glass, heavy-duty steel door, and the vast quantity of supplies inside provided a profound sense of security. 6. The countdown to the end of days is at 10 days. In the past few days, I've accumulated a mishmash of items. I bought 400 barrels of water and 6 large-screen iPads loaded with ebooks and movies. I've also filled a large bookshelf with books I was previously interested in but never had the time to read. Alongside these, I've stocked up on a bunch of Nintendo Switch games. Boredom is the least of my worries now. This should keep me entertained for 4 years, I guess. Thinking about it, I feel a bit melancholic. 4 years. Even if I survive these 4 years, I'll be 26 years old by then. Had it not been for this virus, I might have already embarked on my own life journey, pursuing my dreams. 7. The countdown to the end of days is at 7 days. As the virus outbreak nears, anxiety grips me. I find myself incessantly checking the sturdiness of my house, even though the protective netting outside my windows is so secure that it doesn't budge even when I shake it vigorously or stomp on it while standing on the windowsill. I can't help but feel jittery. I have no experience in dealing with situations like this, nor do I have the skills to fend off zombies or scavenge for supplies. I can only rely on my stockpiles to survive these 4 years. If anything unexpected happens, I'm doomed. My only advantage is the lead time I have, so I must make the most of it. Thus, I hired workers to electrify my protective nets. Although our community rules forbid it, I persuaded them by slipping them a few thousand extra and assuring them that they wouldn't be held accountable, to which they reluctantly agreed. Having done all I could, my thoughts turned to my mentor. She's pretty much my only friend, aware of my troubled past. She often helped me during college, even going as far as to offer me special favors and helped me secure a part-time job. After some thought, I bought her a substantial amount of supplies and some daily necessities. She had already stockpiled some items, but she was still shocked and nearly frantic when I had hundreds of boxes delivered to her place. She called me to ask if I'd lost my mind. I sternly warned her to not send any of it away and to keep it for her own use. After a pause, I also advised her to take leave and stay home for the next few days. She detected the seriousness in my voice and moderated her previously agitated tone. After a while, she gently asked, "What's happened?" "In a week, there will be a zombie outbreak. It's best if you don't go outside." I chose to tell her the unbelievable truth. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. She didn't question the truth of my words, nor did she ask how I knew. "Okay," she said. She believed me. For some reason, that made me want to cry. Hearing silence on my end, she quickly added, "Hey, what's wrong? I believe you. Aren't you happy about that?" "You really are," I simply said. "Thank you." Then I heard her pause briefly, chuckle, and reply, "No need to thank me." After hanging up with my mentor, I looked at the balance of over 700,000 in my account and decided to spend it all, with nothing else to buy. I rented a small car and went to the nearest bank to convert the money in my card into a small box of gold. I've always believed that gold is the most value-preserving commodity in the world. In an apocalypse, it would surely be more useful than cash. 8. With a small box worth 700,000 in gold in my backpack, I drove home. After some thought, I decided to stay home once I arrived and wait for the virus outbreak in the safety of my home. Feeling much more at ease, I began to hum a song happily. However, at an intersection ahead, I saw a woman with disheveled hair, her face unclear, her exposed hands pale to the point of being bluish. My heart skipped a beat, as if I had fallen from heaven into hell. A man pushed her aside, telling her not to block the way, but she bit down on his arm. "Fuck, are you sick?" The man cursed, then kicked her in the stomach, unexpectedly. She quickly got up and started biting like a madwoman. The man tried to curse again, But my arm was torn open by a woman's sharp nails, and the curse I was about to utter turned into a blood-curdling scream. The scene was gruesomely bloody. The entire street was in chaos, filled with unending screams and curses. Many people stood watching from a distance, while others called the police. My heart was pounding. I had no interest in the spectacle and was frantically stepping on the gas pedal. Why? How could the zombie outbreak have started a week earlier than I remembered? What went wrong? As I drove closer to home, my panic increased. Although everything seemed normal here, with people chatting and laughing on the streets, I knew that within 10 minutes, this place would be completely overrun. Continuing forward, I saw a person in a security uniform charging straight towards my car. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my fingertips turning white. With a loud thud, I hit the person, sending them flying over 20 meters away. My car sped on, and glancing in the rearview mirror, I saw him struggling to get up and chase after my car, his spine and legs bent in ways impossible for a human. That person, or rather, that thing, was more resilient than I had imagined. 2 minutes later, I reached the entrance of my residential complex, but the gate was closed, and my car couldn't get through. I took a deep breath, stopped the car at the gate, and saw a zombie lunging towards my car from about 30 meters away. I reminded myself to stay as calm as possible, pulled a safety hammer from the side of the car. It wasn't very lethal, but it was better than nothing. As I opened the car door, that grotesque thing immediately charged at me, howling with a vicious face. My hand trembled as I held the safety hammer, but I still swung it hard, smashing it onto its head. It struggled to rise, but I didn't give it a chance, repeatedly smashing its head until it was deformed and its thick brain matter oozed out. Finally ending its twitching silence, getting out of the car, my legs were weak, but I forced myself to stay calm and sneaked in through a side door, scanning my surroundings. There were bloodstains everywhere but no bodies. Since the occupancy in the complex was low, there weren't as many zombies as I had feared. I only saw about 5 or 6 in my field of vision, feeling somewhat calmer. I looked for cover and made my way to our building without being spotted by zombies. I tried to calm myself down. Just one more door, and I'd be home. Seizing the moment, I bent down and rushed along the wall towards the building entrance, but unexpectedly, I ran into a pale-faced zombie around the corner. It paused for a moment, then lunged at me. Without time to think, I swung the hammer at its face. It seemed not to feel the pain and kept charging at me, howling. I hit it again on the head with the hammer, then ran desperately towards the building entrance. The noise had already attracted the zombies within a few hundred meters, and they all lunged at me. I sprinted to the building, grabbed the doorknob, and pulled hard, but it wouldn't budge. I tried again with more force, but the door remained immovably locked. In that instant, I felt a chill down to my bones, as if I had fallen into an icy abyss, and the world seemed to spin around me. I saw the sun turn blood red, and the whole world seemed enveloped in the red light of the apocalypse. I stood alone, in utter despair, amidst the ruins. In that moment, it felt as though everything had drifted far away from me. I was cornered by 7 or 8 zombies attacking from all directions, wondering if death was still inevitable. I somewhat humorously weighed the hammer in my hand before striking down hard on the nearest zombie. It quickly got back up, and as I fought off one zombie after another, when 2 charged at me simultaneously, I used all my strength to smash the head of one. It seemed like I was doomed. Having been given a second chance at life, I had spent all my savings and fought hard only to seemingly end up as zombie fodder after all, just because I stepped out today. Yet surprisingly, amidst the despair, I felt a calm and a hint of injustice, as one zombie nearly bit into my shoulder and I quietly awaited death. I suddenly heard a whoosh, the sound of a blade penetrating flesh. Turning around, I saw the zombie's head nearly impaled, its viscous fluid splattering. Behind me stood a girl in a black tight outfit wielding a long steel blade. The window to the stairwell on the second floor was flung open and another girl was extending a ladder down to me. After killing the zombie, the girl in black quickly pulled out her blade, slashed at another zombie lunging at me, and yelled, "Climb up the ladder, quick." It felt like a spark had fallen into the barren desert of my heart, igniting all my hope and fighting spirit instantly. My limbs filled with newfound strength, I was no longer fighting alone. It was like a drowning person being pulled to safety in their most desperate moment. I was determined to survive. Realizing this, I immediately turned, grabbed the ladder, and with the safety hammer still in hand, I fiercely smashed it onto a zombie trying to bite my leg, causing its head to explode. As I climbed to the second floor, I knew I was saved. We 3 climbed the stairwell, utterly exhausted yet highly alert. Fearing an ambush by zombies, I gripped the safety hammer so tightly my hand trembled. After what seemed like an eternity, we reached the 28th floor. The girl in black used keys to open the door to apartment 2802, right across from mine. Once inside, my tense nerves relaxed, my legs went weak, and I collapsed on the floor. The girl in black pulled me up forcefully. Go take a shower first, we'll talk after. Nodding weakly, I entered the bathroom, letting the warm water and steam gradually wash away my fatigue. When I came out, the two girls were already sitting around a small table on the carpet, hugging pillows, waiting for me. I joined them, and the girl who saved me introduced herself. I'm June, 23 years old. This is my place. Pointing at the other girl, she said, I met her in the stairwell when I went to save you. The other girl added, I'm Josephine, 25 years old, living in 2601. I responded, I'm Jade, 22, from 2801, June. Surprised, said, so you live right across from me. After a pause, she continued, would you like to stay with us? We don't know what's happening outside, or when the chaos will end, but having one more person means extra support. She paused, pointing to the various blades hanging on the wall. I have plenty of weapons. My eyes caught a silver weapon on the wall, glinting faintly. Following my gaze, June explained, that's a real gun, left to me by my father who was in the military. I only use it as a last resort, so, do you want to stay with us? Her clear, bright eyes and calm, gentle tone conveyed sincerity without being too imposing. She was an incredibly astute individual. As I gazed into her dark eyes, I slowly nodded after a moment of silence. She smiled at me, about to say something, but then a harrowing scream echoed from nearby. We rushed to the window and indeed saw the bustling mall transformed into a hell on earth, where a woman was gruesomely torn in half by zombies, her screams abruptly ending. In comparison, our neighborhood, with only a few zombies roaming, seemed extremely safe. Turning around quickly, I saw their pale faces. Taking a deep breath, I drew the curtains, pulled out my cell phone, and sure enough, the news about the zombies could no longer be suppressed. Videos of zombie attacks were circulating across major platforms, some even broadcasting live. Comments were a mix of admiration for the broadcasters' bravery and concerns for their safety. I swiped away after a glance, knowing all too well that such people often met their end in the stomach of zombies. The internet was flooded with pleas for help. Some said they were too scared to leave their homes and were close to starvation, while others reported just having witnessed their companions get infected, hiding in crevices waiting for rescue. Today marked the first day of a zombie outbreak that would last for years. Silently by my side, Josephine suddenly spoke, I still need to fetch some things from the 26th floor. Let's block the stairwell after I bring them up. Let's go together, suggested June. After a moment's thought, Josephine agreed. Okay. So we tiptoed down the stairwell, fortunately encountering no danger. After several trips, we managed to move all the useful items from Josephine's home upstairs. The living room was nearly overflowing, and we were out of breath. I can't believe it, you even keep fish, June exclaimed, unable to help herself. In front of us was a large aquarium with several lively carps struggling at the bottom, gasping for air since we had drained most of the water to ease moving. Josephine quickly fetched a basin to fill with water from the kitchen, pouring it into the tank and murmuring, just a personal hobby, never thought it would come in handy. Wiping sweat from her brow, June said, then we can rely on these fish for food for a while. She checked the supplies, adding, we have some stockpiled food at home too. The three of us should be able to last 2 weeks without going downstairs, waiting for government rescue. Josephine's home had many heavy pieces of furniture, which I had piled at the fire escape. As I was locking them with a security lock, I paused upon hearing this, reflecting silently before finally saying, I have supplies. Both looked at me, startled, as I stopped my work, took out the key to room 2801, and approached the door. I have a lot of food, I said, pausing. This virus will last a long time. The government will rescue us, but we need to survive until then. Opening the door revealed a staggering amount of food and supplies. I led the stunned pair through each room, showed them my notebook hung on the wall for tracking supplies, and my small backyard chickens and rooftop solar setup. Finally, I said earnestly, I'm sharing these supplies with you. No, they are our supplies. Honestly, when I bought these items, I never imagined I'd meet them, nor did I think we'd be able to escape when zombies blockaded the building below. But now, in this 4-year-long zombie epidemic, I knew I wouldn't be alone anymore, from today onwards. In this apocalyptic world where everyone is out for themselves, we would hold each other's hands tightly. In the morning, I was awakened by the sound of a broadcast. Stretching and opening the curtains to see a loudspeaker announcing as zombies gathered below. Attracted by the noise, I checked my phone and found many pleas for help in the community group chat, including a voice message from a woman in Building 6, crying that her child was hungry and wanted to eat. We've run out of food at home. and while some are willing to pay a high price for food, no one has responded to their requests. Everyone is too caught up in their own survival. At times like these, money is just a number. Scrolling through the messages I received at 6 this morning, I noticed many people were forming a chain in the group chat. I scrolled to the top and saw that the community was tallying the number of survivors to distribute supplies, and many quickly signed up due to lack of resources at home. I hurriedly opened my bedroom door, and as I looked up, I saw June and Josephine already sitting at the dining table waiting for me, with 3 bowls of fragrant egg noodles in front of them. The bone broth turned creamy white, emitting a rich aroma. "You're here," June greeted me with a warm smile. "This is the breakfast Yaya made. It's super delicious. We were just about to call you. Come and try it," Josephine said with a soft laugh. Arranging the chopsticks for me, I sat down. Somewhat foolishly, having always lived alone and eaten instant noodles or plain broth noodles, I was for the first time aware of how flavorful noodles could be. I almost forgot what I was going to say, and it took me a moment to remember to show them my phone. "The community is counting the number of survivors," I told them. "Keep quiet." Josephine was the first to speak. "Yes, we don't need these supplies," June added, "right now. It's most important to hide our location." After discussing it, we unanimously decided not to respond. The innocent are guiltless, but those who hold treasures are blamed. In these apocalyptic times, human nature is unpredictable. We have enough supplies and there's no need to reveal that there are people on the 28th floor over such trivial matters. Once we reached that decision, things became easier. I pulled out my SIM card and threw it into the trash can to prevent community members from discovering that my phone was still operational when they called. I then opened WeChat to check on my mentor. Fortunately, she had also made adequate preparations and had reinforced her home. She was safe staying at home, which relieved me. After ending the conversation, I looked through my contacts, flipping past names I barely recognized or felt unfamiliar with, feeling somewhat lost. It seemed like there wasn't much left in the world to care about. I wanted to ask how the people around me were doing, but I realized I had no one to ask. Realizing how negative my thoughts were, I quickly shook my head to dispel them. I don't have many friends, but now, I know the ones I care about are all alive and well. That's a good thing. On the first day I arrived at this house, I took a door blocker from my home and placed it on the fire door and the emergency exit, and piled up many heavy items to block it. June and I moved blackout curtains and one-way films from my storage at 2801 to 2802. Surprisingly, the soundproofing is excellent here. The windows are bulletproof, and the doors are security doors. Although not as thick as the ones at my place, they still serve as a decent barrier. The elevator is broken for some unknown reason, but it's better this way. Now, the entire 28th floor has become our solid little fortress, almost impervious unless someone uses heavy weapons against us. I must say, Josephine's cooking is really delicious. Eating her food makes me feel as blissful as if the apocalypse had never come. Actually, even before the apocalypse, I never had food this good. Today is August 6th, 2030, the 3rd day of the apocalypse, and my 24th day of being reborn, at 8 in the morning. The usual elderly men are not playing chess downstairs, nor are the elderly women chatting in small groups. The usual office workers and laughing, playing children have disappeared. My city is eerily silent, with only a few zombies wandering aimlessly below. They are dressed in tattered clothes, their eyes white and their skin bluish. Such disgusting creatures. Who are they the children of? Whose parents are they? And who cares about them the most? After several days of testing, everyone now knows that zombies are sensitive to noise and attracted to light, so even during the day, few people dare to draw their curtains. Yet, I can imagine how behind those curtains, there are countless eyes filled with terror and sorrow. They watch the figures downstairs, once their closest kin, now transformed into something neither human nor ghost. It's profoundly sad to witness, heart-wrenching to see. Because of the selfish desires of a very few, the lives of countless ordinary happy people have been destroyed. That woman, moving like a zombie, her tattered white dress so dirty it's unrecognizable. Perhaps she once spent an afternoon feeding stray cats at a street corner. And that zombie in the blue security uniform, his arm broken, still greedily gnawing on a corpse. Maybe he once loved his simple, mundane job, greeting passersby each morning, all destroyed. So many good and kind lives have ceased to exist in this catastrophe when their relatives died just like them. No one will remember them anymore. They will vanish into worthless dust, as mindless zombies, only to be killed someday. Yet so many people are engaging in murder, theft, and looting. It seems in such times, whether infected or not, people turn into terrifying monsters. We live comfortably with the massive supplies stocked in Unit 2801, but others are not so lucky. Occasionally, helicopters drop some supplies, but they are quickly looted. A few people might be devoured by zombies by accident. but most are very careful and can safely return home. Just today, I sat in front of the window, opening just a sliver of the blackout curtain to look outside. A helicopter passed by, dropping several large boxes of supplies on the ground. Soon, a few people stealthily picked them up. As the nearby zombies noticed and started to approach, the people quickly shut the apartment building's door, leaving only the sound of the zombies' frustrated thuds and howls against the door. Others were not so fortunate. The supplies provided by the plane are scant for so many families, leading to a desperate shortage. The thing I feared most happened just days ago. A tall, thin man risked his life to get supplies, but got nothing. He snatched a bag from a woman's hand. She clung to it desperately, so he kicked her stomach viciously and pulled the bag from her grasp. Unable to hold on, the woman let go and was dragged away by zombies. The man turned and ran towards the building but was overwhelmed by the advancing zombies. Both were devoured by zombies, their screams horribly tragic, quickly attracting more nearby zombies. My heart sank. The building's door was left open, putting all the residents at risk. Previously, the area was very secure, many doors not even up to the standard of security doors, easily breached. Soon, the entire building could fall. I saw a young woman, no more than 25, climb onto the windowsill of the 17th floor. In the prime of her youth, she now closed her eyes in despair and jumped. She hit the ground with a heavy thud, and I watched as she turned from a living person into a twisted mass of blood and broken bones. She preferred suicide over being eaten by zombies or becoming one of them. Suddenly, I felt the curtain move slightly. I looked up. It was June, pale-faced, standing there. I don't know for how long. I wanted to save her, but I couldn't. Her voice trembled. I didn't know how to comfort her, so I just gently patted her on the back. In such times, no one can be the hero who saves the world. Everyone has become extremely self-centered. We are colder than we imagine, with our compassion and empathy gradually thinning. We're just preserving ourselves, barely scraping by. Today is August 13th, the 10th day of the apocalypse. The number of active people online is dwindling, and the internet is becoming unstable. I have a feeling it's going to cut out soon. When the internet goes down, the power is likely not far behind. Building 2801 has long been running on solar power, so there's no worry there, but Building 2802 isn't. So I grabbed my phone, and with the spotty signal, I searched online for tutorials. I called over June and Josephine to help, and after a whole morning of effort, we barely managed to connect Building 2802's power system to 2801's. My 6 large solar panels supply more than enough power for our daily needs. With that sorted, we no longer have to worry about electricity. This really wore us out, so June and I shamelessly pestered Josephine to make tomato beef stew. Josephine has been managing our supplies, always calculating carefully and sparingly. We haven't had a good meal in a long time. I've hoarded so much stuff. Wasn't it all to ensure we could enjoy good food even in the apocalypse? Besides, we have enough supplies to live luxuriously for 4 years. There's no need to be so frugal. Just yesterday we had shrimp noodles and tomato sauce. You don't need to look so pitiful, as if I've been mistreating you, Josephine said with a hint of frustration. The aroma of tomato beef stew is too strong. Others are hiding whatever little food they have, and here you are, making sure everyone knows there are people living on the 28th floor. June and I continued to give her our most pitiful looks until she couldn't stand it anymore and headed to the kitchen. This is the last time. Okay, who knows how many last times there have been, but June happily pounced on her. Yay, Josephine, you're the best. Josephine quickly covered her mouth. SHH, keep it down. Unable to speak, June could only smile with her eyes, and Josephine let go. All right. Don't think I don't know what you're up to. Go back and wait. You won't miss out on your share. June obediently nodded, then sneakily winked at me when Josephine wasn't looking. I couldn't help but laugh out loud, then pulled out my iPad and called her over. Come on, let's watch a movie. The lights overhead warmly illuminated the room, and the scent of stewing meat wafted from the kitchen. We sat on the sofa watching a heartwarming family movie, the thick curtains seemingly shielding us from all the horrors outside. As I stared at the screen, I couldn't help but wish that if it weren't for the apocalypse, days like this could go on forever. In recent days, it's been very hot. We have plenty of electricity, but we can't use the air conditioning because the external unit is noisy and attracts attention and zombies. Fortunately, I had the foresight to buy many ice packs, now proving very useful. The indoor temperature quickly became cool and comfortable. Both June and Josephine praised my foresight. Josephine, who had been reluctant to enter the hot kitchen, was now delightedly preparing meat dishes for several days, leaving June and me greasy-mouthed and blissfully disoriented. Nowadays, we keep busy by cleaning and feeding the fish. Today, I was pleasantly surprised to find a warm egg in the hen's nest, just when we thought we could peacefully get through August. On the 27th, The water stopped, the toilets couldn't be flushed, so I brought in a large box of cat litter to manage our needs. As of today, 24 days since the zombie outbreak, water, electricity, and internet are all cut off. Ordinary households have reached their limit with food, and the government stopped delivering supplies a week ago without any further communication. These days, some people are attempting to flee or go out to scavenge for supplies. But most don't make it out of the residential area before being overwhelmed by the tide of zombies, never to be heard from again. Some fortunate few have managed to break through the zombie horde in their vehicles, escaping the zombies. We race towards a distant hope. September 1st, nearly a month since the zombie outbreak began. This was supposed to be the day I started my graduate research at University F. The day my dreams were to begin coming true. Now, I find myself holed up at home, playing Switch games and munching on shrimp sticks with June. June, must you always snatch the last one? I exclaimed, pulling my hand out of the now empty snack bag in frustration. June, clutching her laptop, stayed well away. Don't blame me, you're just too slow. Annoyed, I threw the empty snack bag at her head. She shook it off nonchalantly, eyes glued to her computer, not sparing me a glance. Jade, hurry up and get me another bag. I'm in the middle of a critical plot twist with Haley's wife in the game and can't stop now. Wow, a month has passed, and this woman is becoming shameless. With fewer people around in the neighborhood, we've let our guard down a bit. Zombies wander aimlessly, seemingly slower, perhaps due to the heat. A foul stench of decay wafts from below our building, making us reluctant to open the windows for days on end, and so the days pass. Recently, Josephine has taken up reading ancient medical texts for fun. Like today, I woke up to find her engrossed in Ben Chao Gongmu, a classic herbal medicine book. Honestly, June and I were surprised to learn she was a doctor. We thought with her cooking skills, she must have come from a restaurant. How mistaken we were. Well, if that's the case, we won't have to worry about falling ill anymore. Jade, Josephine said with a hint of resignation. I specialize in oncology, which you probably won't need. Can you do first aid? June asked suddenly, popping her head out from behind me and startling Josephine. Well, I know a bit, but can you disinfect and prevent infection after an injury? I can manage that, but do you know what medicine to take for a fever? That's common knowledge. Yay, then we don't have to worry about getting sick. June was thrilled. The chicken named Looting hatched some chicks, a tiny brood following their mother around. Josephine then decided to lift our spirits by roasting a chicken she pulled out from the fridge. It was crispy on the outside, tender and juicy on the inside, so delicious that June and I could have cried. I wish she wouldn't be so frugal and would cook delicious meals every day. Unfortunately, during a routine check today, we found that only a third of our stored vegetables remained in the fridge. We were forced to start a major planting project. The rooftop of building 2802 was still vacant, and June and I made several trips to bring soil up from 2801. After spreading it out on the rooftop, we planted some beans and bok choy seeds. After watering them, we just had to wait for them to grow. June, hands on her hips, was full of confidence. I believe they will grow into giant bok choy. Fueled by my eager anticipation, I hummed in agreement, but my watering was relentless and half-hearted. Almost bursting out, June noticed and came over to tickle me in frustration. I dodged agilely while continuing to water. In the end, the bok choy couldn't bear the weight of June's expectations and ended up lopsided and wilting. With only a few scrawny survivors, I laughed so hard I almost passed out, and June, embarrassed and angry, demanded I stop laughing. I tried to keep a straight face, but couldn't help myself. Josephine wanted to laugh too, but her own planting efforts turned out just as pitiful. So they both crazily insisted it was the seed's fault. We couldn't laugh anymore. If it really was the seed's fault, then unfortunately, we'd be eating pitiful vegetables for the next 4 years. By mid-October, the weather cooled, and the zombies became active again. Many were missing limbs, exposing ghastly white bones, and some were so decayed they were falling apart. 2 months had passed, their clothes were tattered, and at night we could occasionally hear the zombies' howls. It seemed like there were no more living people in the city. The three of us were left behind, slowly becoming an isolated island. With fewer people around, the starving zombies began to search for food in other communities, which significantly reduced their numbers. Day by day, I could see my city becoming more desolate. For the past few days, I felt a heavy unease in my heart, constantly feeling anxious. At night, I lay in bed, and upon opening my eyes, I found myself outside, whether sleepwalking or not, I couldn't tell. The neighborhood was pitch black without streetlights, and I could barely make out the shadows of vague objects. I looked around and, for the moment, didn't spot any zombies, but my heart was racing as if it was going to leap out of my throat. I wanted to run back to my home, but my legs felt as heavy as if filled with lead. Not far ahead, I saw a man standing in the darkness with his back to me. I wanted to keep my distance, but my body uncontrollably moved towards him. I tapped on his shoulder, and heard myself ask, "What are you doing here?" He turned around slowly, and as his face came into view, his eyes were sunken and pale, his frame skeletal, his skin tinged blue, and he lunged at me with his mouth wide open. I screamed briefly, jolting awake to find myself breathing rapidly and covered in cold sweat. It was a dream, a disturbing dream, at 2:30 in the morning. I opened the door and walked up to the rooftop. The night air was cool, brushing through my hair and across my face. It felt somewhat comforting. The moon played hide and seek among the streaming clouds, with stars twinkling faintly. I gazed out over the city, which now lay in darkness, void of its once bustling lights. I reached out my hand, feeling the cool, moist night air. "Jade," a slightly hoarse yet still gentle voice came from behind. I turned around, and there she was in a loose white shirt, bathed in soft moonlight. "So, you came here because you had a nightmare." In the middle of the night, June leaned beside me on the brick parapet, resting her chin on her hands. I nodded slightly, she yawned sleepily, then playfully ruffled my hair. "Do you need a warm hug from your sister?" My voice was a bit nasal. She opened her arms wide, her eyes calm and steady. I hugged her tightly, and she hugged me back just as fiercely. There was always a comforting strength about June. No matter the time, October 29th, I was awakened by the glaring sunlight. It was Josephine who had drawn the curtains, groggy. I was about to speak when Josephine sneakily led me to the window. Below, a noisy group had burst into our complex. They set up camp in the lobby of Building 6, with several jeeps and guns, over 20 burly men, accompanied by a few disheveled women. I stared in shock. Quickly drawing the blackout curtain, they were very close, and their barbaric laughter could be faintly heard upstairs. We were more afraid of being discovered, for that would surely mean death, or a fate worse than death. So, I checked around the building to make sure nothing would reveal our presence. The rooftop was high. Below, neither our planted vegetables nor the solar panels are visible. Even so, we cannot fully relax just yet. We are constantly on edge, barely daring to breathe. The blackout curtains are drawn all day, making the inside of our home very dark. Josephine lights a small LED night light for illumination, but at night, we fear any light might leak, so we don't even dare to turn on the night light. She also stops cooking. For lunch, we just eat canned food and compressed biscuits. We make no sound indicative of human presence and avoid any unnecessary movements except for essential bodily functions. I spend the rest of the time sitting in front of the balcony, peering through a small gap in the blackout curtains to monitor their movements. On the first day, they just gathered together, laughing loudly as if not afraid of attracting zombies. The three of us took turns keeping watch, never letting our guard down. The worst happened the next day. They started searching the building. 26, Brother Sean, this building is dripping with wealth, a man with tattooed arms said as he carried a bag of rice and a half box of instant noodles. Addressing the Scarface leader, "This is a rich area. The conditions are great," Scarface replied, "just not sure if there are any living people left." Another burly man sneered sleazily, "Those female college students we caught last time in the east of the city, they were quite a treat." The tattooed men also looked nostalgic. "They just couldn't handle much. Died too soon. What a pity." "Enough," Scarface said, looking at his group with a hint of displeasure. "If we find any men, kill them immediately. Capture the women. Of course, Brother Sean gets the meat. We'll be happy with the soup." The tattooed man quickly ingratiated himself. 27. They began their search with Building 1, moving quickly, and in less than half an hour, they came down carrying supplies. There was rice, noodles, drinking water, and various other items. At this rate, they would reach our Building 7 by tomorrow. "Josephine," I called her softly, and she turned around. "Let's move to 2801. That place was better fortified thanks to my renovations, and all our food was there. If they really came up, we could hold out longer." After a moment of thought, she agreed. "Okay." We tiptoed to the living room, only to find June sharpening a kitchen knife. "If they dare come up here, I'll kill them," June said emotionlessly. Josephine quickly went to comfort her. No, let's not resort to violence when there are safer ways." June remained silent, head bowed. I quickly grabbed her hand and pulled her up. "Come on, we're moving to 2801 now. Do you have anything to pack?" I'm not great at changing the subject, but fortunately, June calmed down a bit and wasn't as impulsive as before. 28. Eventually, June took every weapon we could carry from the house, including wall-hung ones, kitchen knives, fruit knives, her prized lightweight steel sword, and the silver pistol. These were our last resort, carrying a modest amount of belongings and unfinished food. We quietly opened the front door. The corridor was eerily silent. Our previously stacked junk had firmly blocked the fire door, and the doorstop was securely in place. Feeling slightly reassured, I looked out the window. They had already searched up to building 4. It wouldn't be long now. We opened the door to 2801, which was filled with supplies. The living space was narrow and cramped. The only bed was in the living room, along with a small sofa and a coffee table. Besides that, there was no other furniture. We placed the supplies we brought from next door in the kitchen, which housed 4 double-door refrigerators. It was not as spacious as the one next door, and because it hadn't been used in a while, there was some dust on the stove. After a quick cleanup, I began to inspect the surroundings. The electrically powered anti-theft grills were exceptionally sturdy, and the blackout curtains were even thicker. Still, it wasn't enough. I wedged a door stopper against the main door and moved a heavy table to block it. After busying myself for half the day, I navigated back through the maze of supplies to the southern living room where we were sleeping tonight. I found June diligently making the beds, while Josephine sat by the window. They stopped searching after the 4th building, Josephine informed me. I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling somewhat less anxious. Maybe they didn't plan to search everything at once, considering they already found enough in the first few buildings to squander for a while. Regardless, it was good news they didn't search our building. Tonight, their noise was louder than usual, attracting some zombies, all of which were dealt with. However, fearing it might attract more, they quieted down a bit. The 3 of us lay in bed. Finding the soundproofing here indeed made it easier to sleep more soundly than next door. Day 2. Early in the morning, a few of them drove out of the neighborhood. As usual, I watched their movements. They ran to a viaduct far from the residential area and seemed to be transporting something. I took out my binoculars and looked closely. My pupils suddenly constricted. It was the bodies of 2 women. Their bodies were bruised and barely covered by clothes. As if accustomed to it, they threw the bodies off the bridge, which landed on the concrete below with a loud thud. The sound quickly attracted the zombies in the vicinity. While they started the engine and drove back toward the neighborhood, I could barely hold the binoculars, my face pale, as I retched on the ground, feeling as though I was about to vomit my guts out. Utterly disgusting. These people were truly the scum of the earth. In the following days, they didn't search the buildings, but hid in Building 6, living a life of debauchery. Every day, the bodies of girls were carried out and thrown off the viaduct. June trembled with anger when she found out, but we were helpless. We were barely able to protect ourselves. They had submachine guns, jeeps, and over 20 strong men. How could we save anyone? How? Brother Sean, this is the last one, a bald man said, pointing at a woman on the ground, barely alive and covered in bruises from abuse. TCH. The scar-faced leader scoffed and lit a cigarette. Keep searching. I refuse to believe there's not a single living person in such a big compound. All right, Brother Sean, what about this woman? A ruined whore, thrown under the bridge tomorrow. Forget about her. Yes, they didn't see the dirty woman's fleeting look of hatred. I had a simple lunch of canned food and bread, then sat by the window again. They had resumed searching the buildings, starting from Building 4 and working their way up, floor by floor. I calmly asked June for a weapon. I took a small hatchet. Josephine grabbed a kitchen knife, and June, the only one skilled with firearms, took a silver handgun. As the group hadn't reached our building yet, June hurriedly taught us how to use the handgun, saying, "If I die, you take this gun." My heart sank, and I opened my mouth but ultimately said nothing. As dusk fell, the group entered Building 7 under the blood-red light of the setting sun. Every one of us was highly tense, holding our breath. Time passed, and I knew they were getting closer to us. Floor by floor, I could even hear their voices. "Search quickly, or Brother Sean will shoot you," a deep, menacing voice said. "Yes, yes," another voice replied hastily, sounding terrified. No, they were at most 3 floors away from us. In less than 10 minutes, they would reach the 28th floor, find the cluttered fire door, and deduce someone was inside. Were we going to die here? I didn't know, but as long as there was a sliver of hope for life, I had to try to survive. They reached the 27th floor, just below us. All 3 of us gripped our weapons tightly. How long could this door hold? Half an hour? 10 minutes? Or perhaps less than 10 minutes? Soon, we heard several heavy footsteps in the stairwell, step by step. They weighed heavily on my heart. I couldn't help but shiver. Was I scared? Of course not, even though my legs were trembling, but I couldn't back down. "Bro, we're at the 28th floor. I'll break this fire door now," said that sycophantic voice, followed by the sound of someone repeatedly smashing the door. My body shuddered, but suddenly a hand grabbed me. Turning around, it was June. She pulled me behind her and stood alone in front of the door with a silver pistol in hand. Her expression was as sharp as winter frost, her stance with the gun professional and trained. her eyes serious and resolute. I had only seen June with that expression once before, when we first met, as she rescued me from a pile of zombies. She was just as determined, steadfast, and fearless. Suddenly, I felt a sense of calm. I had a reliable partner I could always trust to watch my back, a strong friend who would fight alongside me forever, ready to shield me without hesitation. Bro, this door is pretty solid. You're useless, can't even handle this small task, with such a blunt axe. Next time you'll be the one thrown under the bridge to feed the zombies. Ow, bro, that hurts. I thought the doors in this wealthy area would be flimsy, didn't expect them to be so sturdy. Alright, Dan has called us back, let's go, we'll come back tomorrow. No, this door is so sturdy, and there's clutter behind it. There must be someone there. You said the same for the last few buildings. Enough, even if there is someone, they can't escape. If you don't, go back now. Be careful or you'll face Dan's gun. Eventually, the group left, watching their figures disappear from the 7th building. I almost immediately collapsed on the ground, gasping for air as if I had survived a disaster. The other two also felt relieved, and after making sure no one would come back, we placed our weapons on the table blocking the door, ate something carelessly without much conversation, and went to bed to rest. We all knew that surviving was only temporary. If we couldn't find a way to completely eliminate the threat, being discovered was just a matter of time. A tough battle was inevitable, and it was crucial to conserve energy while they were away. From the moment they decided to search the building, it was a life and death struggle between us and them. To have any chance of survival, we had to ignore the stark difference in strength and eliminate them. But this team was strong and fully armed. We could never match them. Where was the way out? I never expected, before I could come up with a plan to eliminate them, they had already been wiped out, and the person who killed all of them was someone they would never have imagined, the woman they had abused and treated like an animal, ordering her around at will. One night, as I got up and tiptoed back to bed, June and Josephine were sleeping soundly, glancing out the window through a gap in the curtains. I noticed a woman at the base of the 6th building, her body bruised and battered. She lay there like a lump of mud, her slightly heaving chest the only sign she was still alive. She had been thrown out of a tent. I felt sad. It was almost November, the weather was getting colder, and the chilly night wind must have been harsh on her barely covered body. I had no power to save her. Turning a blind eye was my only choice. I often felt terribly cold-hearted in situations like this. Just as I was about to look away, I noticed her slowly sitting up. I immediately became alert and picked up my binoculars to carefully watch her movements. She was going to die. She would die by morning. Thrown down from the bridge by those beasts, she was feeding the zombies, and it was these people who had killed her sister, but she was still alive. Before the apocalypse, she could never have imagined that such despicable people could exist in the world. She hated them to her core. She wanted them dead. All of them. Her breathing became rapid. And through her messy, dirty hair, her eyes peeked out, flashing a strange light. She knew she wouldn't survive anyway. Fleeing would only mean dying at the hands of the zombies. She might as well take these people down with her. She looked down at her hands, trembling slightly, dirty from not having bathed for a long time. She despised her current state, so she bit down hard on her wrist. One bite wasn't enough. She bit again, and then a third time. Her teeth weren't sharp enough, so she bit down with all her strength, clenching and not letting go. Even if the pain made her body tremble, she tore at her wrist. Bite after bite, she gnawed her wrist into a bloody mess, blood gushing out, covering her face and hair. She laughed deliriously, then walked into the enemy camp, quietly, bit by bit. She smeared her blood over their tents. The rough material of the tents grated against her wounds, each swipe throbbing with pain, yet she continued, applying more force, almost masochistically, until the entire area was heavy with the scent of blood. With her face pale from blood loss and her breathing weak, a satisfied smile played on her lips. Die, all of you. 37, watching from upstairs, my face pale. My mental defenses almost shattered. I bit down on my clothes to stifle the urge to retch. She had gone mad. She had committed suicide. The zombies, drawn by the strong smell of blood, surged toward our neighborhood like a tide, relentless and unyielding, crushing everything in their path. Limbs of the unknown mixed within, instantly turning heaven into hell. I quickly drew the curtains. The night was restless. Despite the excellent soundproofing, I could still hear the earth-shaking roars of the zombies, the sound of gunfire, and the screams of men. June and Josephine were also awakened. And the three of us sat upstairs, not daring to make a sound, waiting for the dreadful battle to subside. As dawn broke, the zombies in our neighborhood gradually dispersed. Looking down at the 6 buildings, no one was left. Remnants of the tents and traces of blood mixed with viscous fluid were barely visible. They were all dead. In this life and death struggle, where victory seemed impossible, we had survived. 38. After the zombies left, our neighborhood gradually quieted down. Because of those people, we hadn't dared to go up to the rooftop for half a month. On the first day after their death, June and I hurriedly checked on the vegetable seedlings. As expected, the struggling bok choy had all died. I wanted to cry but couldn't. It was already November, the weather turning cold, and June had given up on gardening, content to lie low at home. My main storage area, room 2801, was too cramped, with just enough space to sidle through between supplies, so... Once the crisis was over, we immediately started moving things back. For our first meal post-survival, Josephine cooked potato stew with beef brisket, spicy chicken, scrambled eggs with tomatoes, and even steamed some rice. Having eaten only canned food and bread for nearly half a month, the delicious meal had us devouring 3 large bowls of rice each. I wonder if anyone will come to our neighborhood again, Josephine murmured, looking out the window. At that moment, I was reaching for the last piece of spicy chicken with she at the same time, not paying attention to her words. In the ensuing clash of chopsticks, her skill surpassed mine, and she secured the last piece of chicken. Turning away from the window, I saw her childish behavior and couldn't help but chuckle. Since no one responded to her earlier remark, she let it drop. 39, December 23rd, New Year's Eve approaching. This morning, I saw Josephine digging out a stack of square red papers from somewhere, holding a brush and acrylic paints, writing something. Her grip on the brush, though attempting to mimic the standard calligraphy style, still looked somewhat awkward. I leaned in closer to see. She had already written several Fu characters, each stroke sharp and distinct, giving the characters a forceful and spirited appearance. It was impressive how she managed to write such standard regular script with a neatly aligned brush. That must have been challenging for her. Wow, I said excitedly. I thought Doctor's handwriting was supposed to be illegible, but your writing is really beautiful. As I playfully ruffled her hair, Josephine, somewhat resigned, straightened the mess I had made. My grandmother was a soft brush calligraphy teacher. I practiced with her when I was young. As she mentioned this, the look in her eyes softened as they fell on the Fu character in front of her, as if she was seeing something else through it. I was just about to ask her about it when June burst through the door, still groggy with sleep. She noticed the scattered red papers on the floor and, recognizing the characters, excitedly threw herself at Josephine, giving her a vigorous tousle, much more intense than mine, in June's embrace. Josephine looked like she had been through a storm, frail, pitiful, and helpless, completely disheveled. I love you so much, Joe. I just mentioned it yesterday, and I can't believe you actually did it. Josephine pushed her away expressionlessly, her demeanor and actions conveying rejection, and then she meticulously fixed her hair again. But June didn't mind that at all, happily turning to me. I have lots of these acrylic paints in my cabinet. I bought them intending to donate them to the orphanage kids, but never did, and now I probably never will. I was about to retort, but the words died on my lips. Indeed, how many days could those orphans survive in an apocalypse? 40. The Fu characters Josephine wrote ended up hung on our door. She wrote many, and we even decorated the 28th floor corridor with a few. We wore red clothes, trying to bring a festive atmosphere. Our building was very tall, nearly impossible to climb, and our scavenging confirmed that apart from us, there was no one else in the neighborhood. We could only see a few zombies in the area, which made us relax a bit these past few days. After several days of rain, the rainwater collection and filtration barrels on the roof were nearly full. I used over 10 large water jugs to bathe and mop the floors, keeping them separate from our drinking water. The temperature dropped sharply, and there was no heating, but fortunately, we had enough electricity. Several electric heaters worked simultaneously, making it feel like spring even in deep autumn. But in winter, a few electric heaters wouldn't be enough, so June and I moved some thick blankets and down quilts from 2801. Unknowingly, it had been 3 months since the zombie outbreak began. Ha ha ha. June, that outfit is hilarious. Ha ha ha. I couldn't help but mock June, who, being slow, ended up wearing a bright red outfit, and she was furiously annoyed. Your Mickey Mouse isn't any better. What are these ridiculous clothes? It's great. I thought I would barely survive these 4 years alone, but now it seems my life is full, happy, and there's something to look forward to, making the days ahead seem less daunting. 41. It was December 26th, and June enthusiastically listed a New Year's Day menu of her favorite dishes, which earned her a playful smack on the head from me. Josephine seemed interested in the spicy bullfrog on the list, then stared at me, sending shivers down my spine. Who would have thought to stockpile bullfrogs with the apocalypse coming? Don't look at me. I really didn't stock up. She looked at me for a while longer, then reluctantly shifted her gaze. Oh, this woman is really scary. 42. In the end, our New Year's Eve dinner was mostly made according to June's menu, though I grudgingly added dishes I liked, while Josephine just smiled and took the menu without a word. I suddenly realized that the usually quiet Josephine didn't seem to have any particular likes. She was gentle yet indifferent, rarely gave her opinions, and was an excellent cook who didn't indulge in culinary pleasures. So I asked her, "Jo, won't you add something you like to eat?" "It's okay," she smiled. "I'm happy to eat whatever you guys are having." As expected, on the evening of the 31st, Josephine prepared a table full of dishes: spicy chicken and beef stew with potatoes made especially for me. Sweet and sour spare ribs and braised fish were what she cooked for June, none of the dishes she personally enjoyed. Watching this, I felt a bit gloomy inside. Clang, 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 clang. Turning around, I saw June approaching with a bowl of soup. "I made some rock sugar stewed pears especially for you. Let me know what you think," she said with a beaming smile. Josephine paused for a moment, then also smiled, her eyes curving like crescent moons. I smiled too. I'm fortunate to have met them in these end times. As I was smiling, something struck me as odd. Where did she get pears? It turned out this was a scam. What June had actually made was rock sugar stewed potatoes. Josephine only took one sip before her usually gentle face contorted, and June quickly slipped back to her bedroom to hide. Josephine looked around, couldn't find June, then cracked a bizarre smile at me. My heart skipped a beat. And just as I thought about making a quick escape, Josephine grabbed me by the collar and pulled me back. "Jade, try some," she said in an unusually gentle voice, which sounded devilishly whispering in my ear. I trembled in fear. Josephine grinned menacingly, like an evil matriarch in an ancient harem force-feeding poisonous soup. I took a big gulp unwittingly and froze. What was this taste? Like syrup mixed with laundry detergent, both salty and sickeningly sweet, with the potatoes probably not washed properly. Still carrying the earthy smell and texture, June had a talent for making such a dreadful soup. I looked at Josephine mournfully, innocently. Josephine spread her hands and then pointed towards June's bedroom. I nodded, and together with Josephine, we tacitly ran towards the door. "June, come out." After the commotion, we were all exhausted, our hair a mess, but at least we could sit peacefully around the low table. The red wine I had idly stashed was still unopened, and the food was lukewarm. We decided not to heat it again and just ate it as it was, 3 refugees huddled together eating a meal. It looked bizarre no matter how you saw it. June suddenly sighed. "When will this zombie apocalypse end?" I hesitated for a moment. For years, both looked at me. I steeled myself and continued, "Not only do I know this, but I also know that the government has been building survivor bases. But it's useless, because if an infected person sneaks in, the entire base is doomed." The government built one base after another, and each one inevitably collapsed. None lasted more than 3 months, Josephine said. "So we can't rely on those bases for a few years. The apocalypse is still so far off." She didn't ask how I knew, she just chose to trust me. "My dad is still in the army. I wonder how he's doing." I turned to June, who was looking down, her expression unclear. I hesitated for a long while, but didn't reveal the fact that the army had almost been completely wiped out in the first year. "You don't have to say it. I guess the chances are slim." June lifted her head, her tone and expression eerily calm. Josephine opened her mouth, wanting to say something comforting, but June continued, "I really admired my dad when I was very young. We lived in a military compound. He was warm-hearted, took care of the elderly and children, always busy, seldom had time for me." I was a bit sad, but all the uncles, aunts, grandpas, and grandmas in the compound took good care of me. My older siblings were always willing to play with me and would buy me delicious treats. When we moved away, I was 7 years old. So many people came to see us off. The crowd was massive, stretching further than the eye could see. I still remember another of his comrades' mother grasping his hand and stuffing food into it, and an elderly grandmother with white hair holding a basket of eggs, crying and thanking him for his care over the years. My dad's hands were filled with gifts from people, and they only stopped giving when he could no longer hold any more. They told me, "June, your dad is a good man, you need to make him proud." Later, we moved from place to place, and no matter where we went, he would always encounter people he had helped before. Eventually, we went our separate ways, and I started working on my own, still frequently meeting his old friends. One aunt, upon hearing me called June, asked what my father's name was. After I told her, she smiled warmly at me, saying that our surname, G, was rare, and she could tell just by my demeanor that I was my father's child. Though we didn't spend much time together, I remember many instances of him helping others, from small acts like helping someone carry things to significant actions like seeing a disabled child begging on an overpass, anxiously asking if he had been kidnapped, and even showing his military ID to prove his sincerity, which scared the child into shaking his head. At this point, she laughed. That day, he browsed through a list of kidnapped children on his phone, foolishly standing there for half an hour, then called the police to triple-check that the child was just an ordinary beggar before he gave up. Before leaving, he paid the child's school fees, and the little boy knelt down to thank him. He helped the boy up, then urged him to study hard and left his contact information. He was kind and upright, respected by all. He told me that helping someone is like planting a seed of kindness by the roadside. One day, when you look back, you'll see the seeds you planted have grown into robust flowers blooming expansively. He told me, although we can't help everyone, by helping just one person, their life can change because of our kind gesture. June said, I want to be like him. I finally understood why. The day we first met, when I was about to die at the hands of zombies, June chose to risk her life to save me, a complete stranger whose character and nature she did not know. She made a lot of sense. Indeed, my life has changed because of her. In the pitch-black night, the entire city was devoid of light, and even the stars were hidden behind clouds. The skyscrapers still stood tall, but beneath them, groups of zombies roamed. In every pitch-dark room, where one couldn't see their own hand in front of their face, no one could imagine that behind one inconspicuous dark window, shielded by thick curtains, there lay such a warm scene. Cheers! Our glasses clinked together, the liquor swaying under the warm yellow light as the three of us sat together, enjoying our first meal of the new year. By this time, June was slightly tipsy and said, I have a dream that one day, when I have money, I will open an orphanage. I could help many people, fundraise for elderly people without money for medical care, and support children in mountainous areas to go to school. I could also take in children without parents, and in the orphanage, I could play the guitar for them. As she spoke, there was a sparkle in June's eyes, and I couldn't help but laugh and ask, You can play the guitar? June replied, of course, and then hugged her own guitar, clinging to Josephine. She playfully pleaded, Josephine, Josephine, can I play the guitar while you sing? Josephine smiled helplessly. I only know one song. June's eyes sparkled with excitement as she nodded eagerly. The little boat rocks, rocks, rocks to the bay on the other side. Josephine's voice was light and airy, like a clear spring tinkling in a mountain stream. June tried plucking a few notes, and Josephine sang again. The little boat rocks, rocks, rocks to the bay on the other side. The little boat sways, sways, sways to the faraway homeland. I watch from the mountains, I drift in the great river, I wander in the boundless ocean. In a haze, I return to my homeland. I watch from the mountains, I drift in the great river, I wander in the boundless ocean. In a haze, I return to my homeland. The guitar flowed smoothly with the song, and Josephine was slightly surprised. June proudly said, It's the folk song Boat from the South. How about that? I'm pretty good, right? Josephine smiled warmly. She picked up her glass, gently sipped her drink, and then softly said, My grandmother taught me this song. I became a doctor because of her. She paused, falling silent for a moment. I was an unwanted child after my parents divorced. It was my grandmother who raised me. She taught me to write and sent me to school. My grandmother loved me very much. My deepest childhood memory of summer is of snuggling in her arms, a creaking bamboo chair, and an old palm leaf fan. Then she passed away from cancer. That's why I wanted to become an oncologist. I want to save people, lots and lots of people. As she spoke, Josephine's expression was very calm, but we all knew that she must have been in pain during those times. After a few drinks, my cheeks were also a bit flushed, and I continued. My parents died in a plane crash when I was 14. I always wondered, why did it have to be their plane? Given such a small probability, why did they have to leave that day? I grew up alone, was always reclusive, but I studied very hard. Until university, I obtained a scholarship to study further at University F, to do research in physics, which has always been my dream. I was so close to touching my dream. Overwhelmed with frustration and grief, I burst into tears, fueled by the alcohol, while Josephine gently rubbed my back. On New Year's Eve, we both opened up and talked through the night. We didn't sleep until about 6 or 7 in the morning the next day, and by the time we woke up, it was already evening. After a sleepless night and drinking, my head was splitting. When I pushed open the door, Josephine was already preparing dinner. I nodded slightly to her, and collapsed on the sofa like a dead person. I never want to get drunk and stay over again. It really feels awful, groaned June, who had just woken up and flung open the door, flopping down next to me, bouncing me on the sofa. After dinner and a little rest, we took down the Foo character decoration and stored it for next year. That was how we spent the new year, and soon, we were back to our normal lives. We simply couldn't afford to keep them anymore, so with heavy hearts, we sent a few roosters to heaven, though they didn't have much meat. It seemed wasteful not to use them, so we made do and ate them. Josephine plucked their feathers, gutted them, cleaned them thoroughly, and marinated them with various seasonings. After soaking, she put them into the oven to roast. June and I waited eagerly, and each of us got a golden, crispy roasted chicken. The grass carp in the aquarium have also laid eggs. We placed them into a separate hatching box attached to the side of the tank, hoping to raise many little fish. Every day I wake up to play games, watch shows, snack, enjoy delicious meals, and chat with good friends. This kind of life is simply too comfortable, so the three of us nested in our well-stocked home and embraced a laid-back life. On January 30th, we did a thorough cleaning, including the corridor and the rooftop between the sections 2801-2802. I took stock of our supplies. Nearly half a year had passed, and we had consumed less than an eighth of our stock. The supplies I had hoarded were still substantial, and we could continue to sustain ourselves with gardening and farming. Once again, I was reminded that in a post-apocalyptic world, a paradise like ours could attract envy, for innocence harbors no crime, but possession does. Caution and care are always the best policies, no matter the situation. On February 12th, another living person entered our community, unlike before. This time it was a young girl in tattered clothes and a distraught expression. The weather was still cold. She wore a dirty cotton coat and hugged the walls as she walked. She seemed to be heading somewhere, walking steadily north. Clearly, it was not a good time to be traveling. From our 28th floor apartment, we could see groups of zombies wandering around the entrance of the complex. From her perspective on the ground, she couldn't see them, but she kept moving forward. I want to save her. Can I? I turned around to find June behind me, looking at Josephine and me. Her eyes calm but filled with pleading. I opened my mouth, wanting to stop her, but then I hesitated. What could I say? She had saved me in the same way when we were strangers. Finally, I said, "I'll go with you." As soon as the words left my mouth, she was already changing her clothes. June quickly tightened her belt and put on her shoes. "Thank you." Her eyes were filled with a resolute trust. We moved the clutter aside and pushed the heavy fire door open just a crack, letting Josephine keep an eye out for us as June and I quickly descended the stairs. This was our first time leaving the house since the apocalypse began. I gripped the silver pistol at my waist tightly, feeling somewhat reassured. When we reached the ground floor, through the clear glass of the unit door, we saw the girl running back in terror, pursued by 4 or 5 zombies, their faces ferocious and drooling. She backed against the wall of Building 5, trembling, holding a wooden stick. With trembling hands, she smashed it down on a zombie's head, shattering its skull and splattering its brains. The lock on the unit door had been smashed open by a previous gang of robbers. June pushed the door open and stabbed a zombie in the neck. "Let's go." June grabbed the girl into Building 7. I opened the door, and the moment the two of them ran inside, I slammed it shut. Then came the heavy thud of zombies crashing against it. I held onto the apartment door tightly, turning around. I immediately noticed a half-inch long wound on the girl's arm, where dried blood mixed with dirt had started to fester. Following my gaze, she quickly explained, "It's not a bite from a zombie. I'm not infected." I covered the cut with soil to prevent the smell of blood from attracting zombies. It might look a bit scary. I nodded silently. The continuous thudding of zombies against the door could still be heard, and we could even see the distinct faces of zombies on the door. I took the wooden stick from the girl and used it to secure the door firmly. "This door won't hold much longer. We need to move upstairs now," I said. June nodded in agreement, after what felt like an eternity of climbing, with my legs nearly cramping. Seeing Josephine at the 28th floor's fire escape was like seeing a savior. I ran towards her. Collapsing into her arms, she steadied me, her voice filled with concern. "I was just watching from the window. There were a lot of zombies downstairs, but they've mostly dispersed now. Are you all right?" "They've dispersed," I gasped, exhausted. "I'm nearly dead from fatigue." That meant I was fine. Josephine's worry eased as she then told June and the girl, "Come on in, it's cold outside." The girl followed us into apartment 2802. The warm, clean, and comfortable atmosphere of our home hit her as she entered, and she couldn't help but tear up. Perhaps wary of dirtying the carpet with her soiled clothes, she stood hesitantly at the doorway. Seeing this, a wave of emotion washed over me. I helped her take off her dirty jacket and placed it on a corner cabinet. Just as June finished boiling some water, I gestured towards the bathroom and told her, "Go take a shower. We'll talk afterwards." Her eyes reddened as she asked, "Won't that waste a lot of water?" I smiled and reassured her, "Don't worry, we have plenty of water." She nodded, then cautiously entered the bathroom. June brought her a set of clean clothes, hanging them on the bathroom door handle, before leaving the room. Later, the three of us in June's room decided to keep the vast supplies in apartment 2801 a secret from her for a few days, although she didn't seem malicious. It was better to be cautious. When she emerged from the bathroom, Steam enveloped her. I could tell she was probably attractive even before she tidied up, but after she did, dressed in clean pajamas, I was still momentarily stunned. Her eyes were dark and lustrous, her nose small and perky, and her wet shoulder-length black hair made her look even more delicate and fragile. Now, the pale scar on her arm after being cleaned looked even more vicious. Moreover, her fingers were covered with chilblains, striking against her fair skin. Regaining my composure, I heard Josephine inviting her to sit down and opening a medical kit to treat her wound. She shivered in pain, tears welling up but not falling as Josephine disinfected and bandaged the wound. Afterward, she looked pale but gave us a weak smile, which tugged at my heartstrings. Surviving in these apocalyptic times is not easy. I heard June ask her, "What's your name?" The girl softly replied, "Catherine, my name is Catherine." At that moment, I felt as if struck by lightning. Catherine. In the prophetic dream I had after my death in my past life, she was the one who ultimately exposed Dr. Lee's crimes and saved humanity. If the zombie virus we faced was a book, she would undoubtedly be the main heroine, and me, who died on the first day. They don't hold up well under too much direct sunlight. We were practically in awe. Here was Catherine, who had barely survived a year at an agricultural university, sharing expertise that was reviving our rooftop garden and our spirits. Her tips on planting were a mix of the practical and the little known, and they transformed our approach to urban farming in the post-apocalypse. The subsequent weeks saw our rooftop turning into a thriving green space, an oasis amidst the desolation surrounding us. It gave us not just sustenance, but a renewed sense of hope and purpose. Catherine, once a mere survivor, became the heart of our little community, her knowledge a beacon in our continued fight for survival. Spinach seeds have a tough outer shell, so it's essential to soak them for a few hours before sowing. This process significantly increases the germination rate. We were stunned as we realized why our vegetable yields were inferior compared to others. However, the revelation was more exciting than disheartening. After being forced to eat junk food for months, seeing the lush green vegetables on the balcony brought us to tears. We were immensely grateful to Catherine. Knowing it was our lack of skills, not faulty seeds, that had been the problem was a relief. I eagerly brought out a variety of seeds, including blueberries and strawberries, to show Catherine, looking at her with anticipation. At this moment, I began dreaming of the years ahead, lounging at home, enjoying fresh, natural fruits and vegetables. I absolutely adore Catherine. She's diligent and easy to talk to. Since her arrival, she's taken over all the farm work, including fish farming and chicken rearing, allowing June and me to relax considerably. Other than cleaning daily and a thorough cleanup every Friday, Catherine handles all the farming duties. Josephine manages the supplies and meals. In comparison, June and I seem utterly unproductive. Well, not entirely. June isn't useless. She's skilled with a gun and efficient at killing zombies. In comparison, I'm the real deadweight. So, I turned my sorrow into motivation and started using June's treadmill. But I was exhausted in less than 10 minutes. June mocked me. "How's it going? Feeling strong?" "Not at all." I was so out of energy I felt like slapping her, but I couldn't even lift a finger. That's it. I'm no longer envious of June's fit body. It's earned with her life on the line. I've realized that with such capable teammates, settling for mediocrity seems to be my fate. As the days grew warmer, eventually turning hot with the arrival of midsummer, the watermelons Catherine planted ripened. Sitting in front of a fan, with a half-eaten watermelon in my lap and a video game controller in hand, I must admit, life felt pretty great. The zombies in our neighborhood had dwindled, leaving only a few wandering near the main gate. We could easily stroll down the streets. But with our ample supplies, there was no need to venture out. On August 3, 2031, a whole year had passed since the zombie outbreak. Time has flown unbelievably fast. I vividly remember the phone call with my mentor when it all started. I haven't contacted her in a year and hope she's still safe. Just then, I heard Catherine's exclamation. Looking up, I saw she had found several of June's acrylic paint cans. Her eyes sparkled as she asked, "Can I use these?" I shrugged. "They're June's, but she probably won't mind." After waking up from my nap, I found June and Josephine gathered around Catherine, engrossed in something. I approached them, sleepy-eyed, and was stunned by the scene. Catherine's painting of a vibrant spring forest was so lifelike it was breathtaking. I'm no expert in art, but the immersive quality of her work amazed me. Catherine turned to us with a smile. "Just a random sketch. It might not be very good." June stepped forward, playfully ruffling Catherine's hair. "That's what you call a random sketch. You could fool anyone, little Catherine. You're a true artist." Blushing, Catherine replied, "Please, June, stop teasing me." Curious, I asked, Catherine, with your talent, why didn't you pursue art instead of biology? Aren't you wasting your gift? She looked at me seriously. Not a waste. I love to paint, but I haven't studied it formally, certainly. Here is a fluent translation of the paragraphs from Chinese into English, admittedly. I'm no match for professional students, and, compared to painting, I have a greater fondness for botany. Looking at the lifelike ferns and the tall, lush banyan trees in the painting, I nodded in understanding. On October 9th, I nervously crouched by the window, waiting for the southward advance of the zombies. In my premonitory dream, this was a major disaster. If the initial outbreak killed nearly 90% of the population, this wave would drastically reduce the remaining survivors. The time was early October. After briefly explaining to 3 others, we decided to take turns keeping watch at the window. This wave of zombies was also a point of their evolution, so we needed to document the characteristics and weaknesses of these advanced zombies. Before the wave hit, we moved to the confined space of apartment 2801 and set up a makeshift observation post with a telescope and a small table. As I watched the horizon, my pupils dilated. At the very edge of the city, where it met the sky, a dark mass appeared, spreading southward. Catherine, I whispered to Catherine, who was closest to me. She looked over with a serious expression and whispered back, "Is it time?" I nodded. When the wave hit, my city turned into a hellish landscape. They could smash through any door, crazily flooding in and tearing apart any living creature behind them. They turned on each other, biting and devouring their kind. Through the telescope, I forced down my disgust and wrote, "Lacks intelligence, loses photosensitivity," followed by cannibalism in my notebook. It was time to switch shifts. Josephine was already standing behind me. I nodded at her, then tiredly walked to the bed and carefully lay down. Since I had only prepared one bed for myself before the apocalypse, there was just one. Fortunately, I had bought a large bed, so 3 people could sleep in it without being too cramped. Listening to the soft, shallow breathing next to me, I gradually fell asleep. Zombies broke through the flimsy door of Building 7 and entered our building. I had just gotten up in the morning when June shared some bad news. Though I wasn't particularly surprised, I was sure that besides us on the 28th floor, there were no other survivors in the building. I didn't think they would climb up to our floor. It was Catherine's turn to watch. After quickly washing up, I grabbed 2 purple rice-filled pastries from the storage for breakfast. June and Josephine had been on night duty and were still catching up on sleep. I sat alone at the dining table, quickly finished eating, and then picked up a book from the shelf. The 4 of us took turns on watch, 3 hours each, rotating twice a day. The main task was to observe movements, record the time, and analyze the characteristics of the advanced zombies. The situation was evolving beyond my expectations, and I had a faint premonition that we might have to leave this place due to changes in circumstances, though whether this would be for better or worse, I couldn't tell. Jade, hearing Catherine's soft call, I placed a bookmark on the page I was reading, put the book back on the shelf, and walked over to the observation point by the window. It was my turn to watch. In the past few days, I meticulously observed the evolution process of the zombies through the telescope, and my heart grew stronger. I watched a zombie tear apart and dismember another, initially feeling nauseous, but knowing I had to get used to it, I forced myself not to look away. No, I could watch these grotesque creatures cannibalize each other without flinching. I noticed that the zombies advanced by eating everything they could, including other zombies in the horde. They lost their sensitivity to light, but became more sensitive to sound. From the 28th floor, over 100 meters above the ground, the zombies looked like a seething mass of tiny dots. I had installed the best soundproofing materials and double-glazed bulletproof glass, but even a slightly loud noise could still attract their attention. We did our best to keep silent, simplifying our daily communications to the bare minimum to avoid drawing their attention. During the first week of the zombie horde, we coexisted peacefully with them. However, I knew that the real catastrophe would come in the final days of the horde. Another week passed, and the number of zombies slowly decreased. Our lives relaxed a bit, and I started to doubt whether the zombie horde would really come to an end. It turned out that being hopeful was a mistake. At dusk that day, it was supposed to be June's shift, but due to the unusual behavior of the zombie horde, all 4 of us were sitting by the window. The zombies heading south were several times denser than before, each dressed in tattered clothes, blood-stained, and crowded together tightly without any gaps visible. Suddenly, a thunderous boom shook the earth. Before I could figure out what had happened, I saw flames shooting up into the sky to the east, followed by billowing smoke. The gas station exploded, Josephine whispered. As the sky darkened, the thick smoke mixed with dust nearly obscured our view. The zombie horde was interspersed with raging fires, stepping over ruins, giving a desolate sense of the apocalypse. They surged crazily in all directions, storming into our building, their roars echoing continuously. The disaster lasted until the morning. Under a sky full of dark clouds, a light rain began to fall. The fire was extinguished, revealing the charred remnants of what was burned. The number of zombies drastically reduced, and after a few weeks, things slowly returned to normal. We survived yet another close call, but there was little joy in our hearts. After all, my premonitory dream had been largely inaccurate, and no one knew how many more such disasters we would face. I became increasingly convinced that we might not be able to wait out the apocalypse on the isolated 28th floor as I had originally imagined, in the unpredictable and rapidly changing end times. Having prophetic dreams, I felt for the first time that the future was not set in stone and its development remained uncertain. Every butterfly effect could influence the global situation. Sitting and waiting for death is never a good strategy. I had thought that aside from us, there were no other living people in this community, but today I was shocked to see a small, thin boy enter our building to evade the zombies. I knew that the global population had decreased again after this wave of zombies. But the fact that we could still see a survivor, and a defenseless little boy at that, was surprising. In him, I saw the opportunity to survive that I had been seeking for some time. I told the others about this, and after discussing it, we unanimously decided to save him. This boy must have had some contact with the evolved zombies. He might hold the key to breaking the deadlock, and we might be able to get useful information from him. Moreover, setting aside that point, out of humanitarianism, we had both the ability and the responsibility to save him. After some discussion, it was decided that Catherine would stay at home, while I, Josephine, and June would go down to rescue him. June always liked taking risks and was enthusiastic about rescuing others. I was keen on extracting useful information from the boy, while Josephine frowned, pondered for a moment as if she wanted to say something, but then held back. Armed with a hatchet, Josephine with a gun, and June, lively as ever, wielding her steel knife, we pushed open the fire door and went out. Catherine stood in the hallway on the 28th floor, her expression worried, saying, "Be careful." June's face showed panic as she exclaimed, "Little Catherine, how have you also become like someone? Can nagging be contagious?" Of course, that someone she referred to wasn't me. As soon as she finished speaking, she received disapproving looks from both Catherine and Josephine. June stiffened for a moment before quickly assuring, all right, nothing will happen." Satisfied with her response, Catherine nodded and then looked at us. "Sister Josephine, Jade, safety first. I'll wait for your return." Josephine and I nodded, then turned and went downstairs. Next, we began to search floor by floor for the little boy. At the 24th floor, we encountered a zombie, but it was quite weak and slow, and I managed to take it down without much effort. The more smoothly things went, the more uneasy I felt. We continued our search down to the 6th floor. Just as we were about to head further down, I noticed the door of a fire hose cabinet in the wall was half open and trembling. I signaled to June and Josephine with a glance, then tiptoed forward and gently opened the door. The moment I opened the door, a sharp and piercing scream nearly burst my eardrums. I quickly pulled the boy hiding inside the cabinet out. He was panicking and tried to struggle, but I restrained him and firmly covered his mouth. At the same time, several deafening roars came from below in the stairwell, signaling danger. I wanted to hide, but it was too late. Several advanced zombies, remnants of a previous horde, rushed up in the blink of an eye. They were dozens of times more agile than regular zombies, and instantly lunged at me with their gaping jaws. "Be careful." I heard June's urgent voice, and in an instant, she appeared in front of me, plunging her steel knife into the zombie's skull. Holding the boy with one arm, I swung my hatchet with the other, cleaving another zombie's head in two. As several zombies poured into the hallway, it looked like we were overwhelmed. Josephine pulled out her handgun and fired 2 shots, taking down the 2 leading zombies. She then scooped up the boy and yelled, "Run!" We quickly ran upstairs, but the zombies on the ground floor were attracted by the gunfire and also chased after us. Hearing the roars getting closer and unable to think further, I quickly pulled open the door of apartment 1002 and dragged us inside. We barely managed to close the door when the roaring sounds reached us. It seemed like the zombies couldn't locate the source of the noise, and there was a moment of silence in the hallway. Hiding behind the door, I lightened my breathing, listening to the footsteps of several zombies outside. I felt one zombie slowly approaching the door. My hand holding the axe was sweating profusely. I gently loosened my grip, wiped my sweaty hand on my pants, and gripped the hatchet even tighter. If they discovered us, I bet the worn-out door wouldn't hold for 2 minutes. It lingered in front of the door momentarily. My whole body trembled, but I clenched my teeth and made no sound. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the other zombies moving away. Just as my tense back began to relax slightly, I heard a thud behind me. It was the boy that Josephine was holding, who had accidentally hit his hand on the floor. Though it wasn't loud, in my heart, it thundered like a shockwave. I once again heard the roar of the still nearby zombies outside the door, and my only thought was, it's over. Without thinking, I instinctively pulled the door open and swung my hatchet fiercely at the hideous zombie outside. Another zombie that hadn't gone far lunged at me, almost biting my arm, just in the nick of time. June drove her steel knife into its shoulder, though she missed the exact spot. I couldn't worry about the zombies in front of me. Just as I was about to go help her, she pulled out her knife again and fiercely thrust it into the zombie's sunken, pale eyeball. The blade pierced through the skull, clean and decisive, if it weren't for the muffled groan of pain I heard, but at that moment, we couldn't afford to pay attention to anything else. Such noise would definitely attract the attention of other advanced zombies with keen hearing, and we desperately sprinted upstairs. Zombie groans echoed through the stairwell. Our only thought was to keep running forward. When we reached the stairwell corner, I grabbed a fire extinguisher and threw it down with force. A loud thud reverberated in my ears as I ran and looked down. The zombies struck by the fire extinguisher tumbled down, knocking down several others in the narrow stairwell entrance. I couldn't spare any more attention and just kept running upwards. After what felt like an eternity, we finally burst through the fire door on the 28th floor. Catherine was the last one in and immediately slammed the door shut, then barricaded it with heavy furniture piled behind it. We had survived, exhausted and drenched in cold sweat. My limbs felt like they were made of cotton, and I didn't even have the strength to walk into room 2802. I collapsed in the corridor. As I was catching my breath, I suddenly remembered the muffled groan of pain and was jolted awake. Struggling, I managed to turn over and saw June leaning against the wall, her face pale, her black clothes torn, with a bleeding wound on her shoulder soaked through by zombie scratches. I felt a chill go through me, my blood turning cold. Catherine saw it too, her eyes quickly reddening. "June, what's wrong with you?" As she trembled and tried to help June up, June gestured for her to stop. She struggled to her feet and walked into the room. I followed, and Josephine quickly grabbed alcohol and bandages to tend to her wound. June just slowly took them, her voice soft and hoarse, but firm. "I'll do it myself." She slowly walked into a cluttered storage room. I heard Catherine suddenly break into sobs. "Sister June." June's steps faltered, then she forced a smile. "It's okay. I might not be infected. Remember to bring me food every day." Then she walked into the storage room. I followed her hesitantly. The room was spacious, and hearing my clear footsteps, June suddenly turned around, her irritation clear. "Jade, do you have a death wish?" Tears blurred my vision as I looked at her. "I just want to hug you. Just like the day I had a nightmare and went up to the rooftop, and you hugged me. I want to hug you." She paused, then suddenly bowed her head. A few seconds later, when she looked up again, her eyes were filled with tears. "Jade, don't cry," she whispered, her voice trembling as if she might disappear the next second. My tears flowed even more. June picked up her lightweight steel sword, clenched it tightly, then let go. After a few breaths, as if making a significant decision, she handed it to me, saying, "Jade, if I turn, please use this knife to kill me. Harming anyone was never my intention. If I become a monster, remember it's not me. If I turn, I must die. I'd rather be dead. Please use it. Kill me." She pushed me out of the storage room. Then I heard the sound of the door locking behind her. These past few days have been very oppressive. Catherine often couldn't help but cry softly. Josephine, with red-rimmed eyes, still managed to prepare delicious meals, which she then slipped through the crack of the door into the storeroom. I always worried, now that winter had come, whether June, alone in that storeroom, might be cold. The young boy was as thin as a reed, always curled up in a corner. No one asked if he needed a bath or cared for him at all. Initially, I thought I might get some information about the zombies from him, but I've since given up on that idea. I know it's not his fault. Yet I can't help but take my anger out on him. It's ridiculous. I know, who do I even have the right to be angry at? June was trying to save me, but no matter what, I just can't bring myself to like him. He was completely ignored by both me and Catherine. Only Josephine would look at him for a long time, sigh, and then place food in front of him. A few days passed. When I went to slide food through the crack in the storeroom door for June, I found it difficult to push through. Crouching down, I saw that the food I had sent in the morning was blocking the crack. It hadn't been taken. 69, midnight. Unable to sleep in my bedroom, I suddenly heard a crunching noise coming from the direction of the storeroom. I shivered under the covers, the sound intermittent and showing no signs of stopping for a long time. So, I gently got out of bed, opened the bedroom door, and approached the storeroom entrance. The crunching noise grew clearer. I picked up a lightweight steel sword nearby, turned the lock, and with trembling hands, turned the doorknob. I pushed open the door. Moonlight streamed through the window, bathing the storeroom floor. In the shadow not illuminated by the moonlight, beneath the window, was a small figure curled up. Chains bound her tightly to a chair behind her. She lay on the floor, unable to move, only able to crunch on the leg of the table in front of her, which she had gnawed through partially. Standing a meter away from her, I could clearly see her skin turning blue, purple veins protruding, her eyes covered with a white film, and the black wound on her shoulder festering and dark. Faced with such a scene, overwhelming sadness surged in my heart, almost suffocating me. She was only 25 years old. She had a simple and ordinary wish, to open an orphanage. I remember how her eyes sparkled when she talked about her dream on New Year's Eve, but in such a post-apocalyptic world, even such a simple dream was unattainable. Such a good girl, kind to everyone, yet doomed to such a cruel fate. I took another step forward. Sensing my approach, she stopped gnawing at the table leg and struggled slightly. The iron chain around her neck tightened, but she still strained to look up at me. That face was so familiar. She had once held me, played the guitar for me, told me, helping one person can change their whole life for the better. Such a good girl. My hand trembled holding the sword, but finally, I stepped forward, raising the sword high. June had saved me twice with this sword, and now I had to use it to end her life. With a thud, the sound of the blade piercing flesh filled the air. After a couple of twitches, there was no more life in her. My hand slid down powerlessly, and the steel sword fell to the ground with a clang. All was silent, except for the gentle night breeze outside, billowing the curtains. At that moment, what came to mind was, once upon a time, when we first met, a girl dressed in black held a sword, resembling a celestial being descended to earth, filling me with hope for life. It seemed as though all the brilliance of the world gathered beneath her blade. I remember that night on the rooftop, her gentle and captivating eyes clear and serene, bringing peace to anyone who looked into them. Do you need a warm hug from your big sister? I pushed open the door to the storeroom and saw a figure sitting on the sofa in the living room. I didn't look at her, just numbly walked back to my bedroom. All I wanted was to sleep, just to sleep, Jade. But she softly called out to me. I finally turned to glance at her. It was Josephine. My fists clenched so tightly they trembled, and I hung my head. After a few seconds, I took a step towards her. My steps quickened, and then I threw myself into her arms. She embraced me as I trembled. Josephine's embrace was warm, and my tears soaked her clothes. She gently patted my back, and after what seemed like an eternity, she suggested, "Shall I sing a song for you?" Without waiting for my response, Josephine started to sing softly to herself. The little boat sways, sways and sways, swaying to the bay on the opposite shore. The little boat rocks, rocks and rocks, rocking to the distant homeland. Her voice was tender, and the living room was bathed in silvery moonlight, making everything look dreamlike. However, as she sang the last note, I heard her voice tremble. A warm liquid streamed down her cheeks. On December 26th, nearly a month after June had left and just before the New Year's Day, Josephine took out the Fu character we wrote last year and remarked nostalgically, "Another year has passed so quickly." She caressed it gently, her eyes reddening. I knew she was thinking of June again. I hesitated, but decided not to disturb her. Josephine's relationship with us was more like that of an older sister than just a friend, always taking care of us. If June were still here, she might have comforted her, but since her departure, I felt clueless and struggled to react when faced with such situations. She was always quiet, composed, and reserved. Only now did I realize that I had never truly understood her. I silently left the living room. It seemed that I was the only one among us who had calmly accepted June's death after that night, yet, seeing Josephine like this reminded me of a night when I went up to the rooftop and realized that no one was standing beside me anymore, and I suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to cry. Turning around, I saw a little boy sitting in a corner. Catherine asked him, "Xiaohui, do you want to join us in putting up the Fu character?" We had started to interact a bit with the boy over the past few days, although I was still reluctant to speak to him. Both Josephine and Catherine had chatted with him, inquiring about his name, family background, and any encounters with advanced zombies, though it appeared he knew nothing about such matters. I found it odd. How had he survived without knowing anything? I couldn't help feeling uneasy. Recently, he seemed less uneasy than when he first arrived, when Catherine asked him the question. Xiaohui just waved his hand and quickly ran into his tiny bedroom, leaving her slightly disappointed but not overly concerned. We decorated our home with the Fu character, making it less bleak than before. As we set the table for the New Year's Eve dinner, Josephine went to call Xiaohui, but Catherine stopped her with a gesture. "He's asleep, let's eat." Josephine nodded in understanding. The table was still laden with abundant dishes. Catherine eyed the braised fish hungrily, and Josephine, amused, pushed the dish towards her. Catherine's eyes lit up, and after carefully tasting it, she showed a satisfied expression. I also smiled, but somehow felt something was missing. After some thought, I suddenly remembered and took out a few cans of beer from a cabinet nearby. June had always wanted to drink them, but hadn't been able to because of my discouragement and her previous unpleasant experience of getting drunk. I opened a can for each of us. It's New Year's. How can we not have some drinks? I said, then took a big gulp. Catherine and Josephine stopped eating and looked at each other. Then Catherine cautiously sipped her beer, immediately frowning. However, I didn't care and kept drinking, prompting Josephine to quickly snatch the beer away from me. She then pushed the roast chicken closer to me and said, "Jade, would you like some food?" I stared at her for a while, then smiled. Sure. I picked up a chicken leg with my chopsticks. Josephine visibly relaxed, and I said, "You guys eat too, or the dishes will get cold." I ended up drinking quite a bit. By late night, all three of us were feeling dizzy. I was the worst, rushing to the bathroom and starting to vomit while clinging to the basin. Josephine and Catherine hurried over, patting my back gently. Tears of physical reaction streamed down as I vomited, followed by a mix of snot and tears. Later, they helped me clean up. I felt dull, like a soulless marionette. Josephine gently hugged me, and like opening a floodgate, I began to cry clinging to them. Josephine, Catherine, I caused June's death. It was me. She died trying to save me. I stabbed her with her sword. It was me. The repressed feelings I had buried inside burst out like a flood once I found an outlet. I cried hysterically, releasing all my emotions. Josephine's body trembled, but she just held me gently, soothingly stroking my back like one would pet a kitten, calming my emotions. "It wasn't you. It wasn't you." Her voice was hoarse. She said, "It wasn't you." I cried for a long, long time. Eventually, through tear-blurred eyes, I asked them, "Can we all just keep living? Please, let's all survive." "Okay, yes, yes." Josephine wiped my tears with a towel, then held my face earnestly and said, "We'll all keep living." I slept through to 8 p.m. the next day. When I woke up, it was already dark outside. This time, I felt somewhat refreshed, not physically, as my body was sore and achy, but mentally, it was as if the heavy stone that had been lodged in my chest had suddenly vanished, and I felt unbelievably light. Upon asking, I found out Josephine had brewed me 3 large pots of sobering tea. Something felt off, but I resolved never to engage in such embarrassing behavior again, knowing my terrible tolerance, yet still forcing myself to drink. I had mostly forgotten about last night's events, only vaguely remembering that I had said something, but I couldn't recall what it was. After racking my brain and still only having a fuzzy recollection as if separated by a veil, I decided to forgive myself and not dwell on it any longer. By early February, we had mostly returned to our pre-apocalyptic lifestyle, reading books, snacking, chatting. It didn't feel like we were in a post-apocalyptic world. However, one early morning, I groggily got up to use the bathroom and found the door wouldn't open. I pushed hard, and though the door felt like it was stuck on something, I managed to open a crack. The first thing I saw was that all the living room lights were on, bright as daylight, nearly blinding me. I wondered who would turn on such bright lights. It took me a while to adjust to the brightness. Looking down, I saw the reason the door wouldn't open. A piece of clothing had been folded into a strip and stuffed into the gap under the door to block the light from leaking into my bedroom. I noticed that Catherine and Josephine's doors were similarly blocked. Catherine was also struggling to open her door. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of the large living room window. It was pitch black outside. Something wasn't right. Why can I see outside? The blackout curtains weren't drawn. In a city that has been without power for over a year, suddenly one building shines as brightly as daylight, being the tallest in the vicinity. Its visibility in the pitch-black night is, as you can imagine, quite striking. The blood coursing through me seemed to freeze in an instant. All I knew was that it was over, completely over. As long as there was one living person left in the city to look up, they would immediately notice our house, still powered, all efforts of concealment undone. Our location exposed. Panic and fear nearly overwhelmed me. I hurriedly turned off all the lights. Catherine managed to push the door open and run to draw the blackout curtains tightly closed. Only then did we notice Xiaohui shivering between the couch and the cabinet. I grabbed his arm and dragged him out, eyes bulging with fury. "Did you turn on the lights? Did you block the door? Why would you do this? Are you trying to get us killed?" Xiaohui, dragged out, just hung his head in silence. Curling up on the floor, unlike my agitation, Catherine remained calm. She asked, "Was it you?" Xiaohui pursed his lips, silent, so she emotionlessly grabbed him by the collar and lifted him. "I'll ask again, was it you?" Xiaohui still closed his eyes, pretending to be dead, until she suddenly raised her voice and sternly commanded, "Answer me." Startled, he jerked and fearfully looked at Catherine. In that moment, we understood everything. I heard her chuckle softly. Then she raised her hand high, slap. The sound was sharp and loud. Shocked, I saw Catherine's heavy slap land on Xiaohui's left cheek, turning his head to the side, his cheek swelling visibly fast. Didn't we tell you that turning on lights at night would expose our location? The blackout curtains are always drawn. Would they open by themselves? Don't tell me you've lived out there so long you don't even know this, Catherine spoke softly. Even if you lack that common sense. How did you know to block our door? What were you trying to do? How does getting us killed benefit you? Catherine didn't expect an easy answer from him. After speaking, she released the grip on his collar, and Xiaohui collapsed to the floor, his head hitting it with a dull thud. Catherine found a rope and tied him up, then threw him into the adjacent bathroom and locked the door. Turning around, she saw me, her gaze, icy as frost, melted in an instant, her whole demeanor relaxing. Weariness and fatigue barely concealed, she gently wrapped her arms around me, burying her head in my neck, murmuring, "Jade, I'm so tired." Seeing her handle Xiaohui, I was shocked. In my memory, she had always been that shy and timid 19-year-old girl. Somehow, she had grown capable of handling things on her own, filled with a myriad of emotions. Her words, "I'm so tired," successfully diverted my attention. I glanced at the living room clock. It was already 3 a.m. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. It looks like we won't be getting any sleep tonight. I don't know how long the lights were on, but it's likely we've already been exposed. After a pause, I voiced my biggest doubt. Why would he do this? As far as I can tell, both you and Yao Yao treated him well, and even if I was somewhat indifferent, it surely wasn't enough to make him despise me to the point of wanting to die together, right? Catherine thought for a moment, then said, "No. It wasn't about dying together. There must be a reason for his actions. Blocking the door crack was to keep us from noticing. Opening the blackout curtains and turning on the lights were signals," we said simultaneously. "Right," Catherine continued. "There must be someone outside he knows. By turning on the lights, he was signaling our location to the outside world. They might have been targeting us all along, and Xiaohui was just bait. A trap to lure us in." I felt somewhat sad. It was my eagerness to know what was happening outside that endangered everyone. Catherine comforted me by patting my head. "It's not your fault. No one could have anticipated this happening. Besides, deciding to rescue him was a collective decision, so I share some of the responsibility too. What's crucial now is to keep a close watch on Xiaohui, and also be wary of his companions." I expressed my concerns. "I don't know how many of them there are. We might not be able to handle them." Catherine's expression darkened. "Let's wake Josephine up first, and I'll see if I can get anything out of Xiaohui." Thus, when I brought Josephine to the restroom at 28:01, we were met with this scene. Catherine's dagger was pressed against Xiaohui's neck, and with minimal effort, the sharp blade cut through a layer of skin, drawing beads of blood. "You have two choices, speak or die." Her eyes were icy cold, and under such a gaze, no one could doubt she might press harder, cutting an artery. Yet, Xiaohui remained silent, adopting a resigned demeanor. "I'll give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, with each count." Her gaze grew colder. Before she could say 1, Xiaohui suddenly moved, thrusting his neck against the tip of Catherine's dagger. She couldn't help but cry out, quickly loosening her grip on the dagger to avoid severing Xiaohui's artery. Catherine quickly stood up, unable to contain herself any longer. She cursed, "Madman," then kicked Xiaohui in the shoulder. He grunted as his back hit the restroom wall. Catherine left the restroom with a pale face, and as she closed the door, she saw us standing at the entrance. She rushed into my arms, trembling. "Jade, Josephine, I almost killed someone." I gently stroked her back, trying to offer some comfort. It was clear Catherine only meant to intimidate him, but she hadn't expected him to be so reckless, having just heard the whole story. Josephine, already informed, furrowed her brows and said, gravely, "It's okay, no one expected him to throw himself onto the blade." Catherine still hung her head low, clearly upset. Josephine said, "If we can't get anything out of him, let's just stay in the house and not make any rash moves. We've locked the fire doors tightly and blocked them. Even if someone comes, they won't get in easily." Catherine and I both nodded in agreement. We returned to apartment 2802. Where Josephine warmed up some bread and porridge for our breakfast and then stationed herself by the door. Soon after, she called us over anxiously. Catherine and I approached the door and, sure enough, we could hear faint footsteps coming from directly above on the rooftop. There was someone on the rooftop. I felt a rush of panic, having assumed that any visitor would come up through the building's stairwell, not directly onto the rooftop. But this was the 28th floor, surrounded by buildings none of which were taller, and spaced far apart, making it difficult to climb up. How did this person get up here? Seeing my distressed expression, Josephine squeezed my hand gently. I regained my composure and after listening carefully for a moment, determined that there was only one person on our vegetable-planted rooftop. I analyzed the situation. The large metal door leading from the rooftop to the stairwell was sturdy, and we had locked it from the inside. Unless someone had a key, it would be hard to break through with brute force. Although the door to 2802 was not as secure and could potentially be breached, we could use this time to retreat to 2801. The steel door next door would definitely not be broken by a single person, ensuring our temporary safety. I took a deep breath. The situation had escalated to a life-or-death struggle. He had discovered us and would undoubtedly aim to seize our supplies. I didn't want to resort to killing unless absolutely necessary. Maybe there was another way to eliminate him. Just as I was thinking, feeling like I had overlooked something, I suddenly heard the sound of fabric rubbing in the stairwell, as if awakening from a dream. I remembered that we hadn't locked the bathroom door the second time we left. Ignoring everything else, I flung open the door and dashed into the stairwell, running upwards recklessly. Around a corner, I saw Xiao Hui struggling against the door that separated the rooftop from the stairwell. He was still tied up, but one hand had freed itself and was awkwardly trying to unlock the door with a key. All I could think was, faster, just a bit faster, stop him, stop him. I lunged at him, nearly preventing it all, then heard a faint click. Just a moment too late, my blood ran cold. My teeth chattered from the chill, and instinctively, I reached to grab the doorknob to secure the door. Too late, the door swung open. In that moment, a strong force tugged at my clothes, pulling me back. It was Josephine. Almost instantly, she raised her gun towards the door. Before I could see clearly, I heard the sound of gunfire, almost simultaneous shots. Then, the person behind the door thudded heavily to the ground, and Josephine, her hands trembling with the gun, stepped forward and fired 2 more shots. The man convulsed in pain, and she bent down to check that he had completely stopped breathing before slowly collapsing to the ground herself. It all happened so quickly. Within a few breaths, Josephine had hit a vital spot, but she was also wounded, fresh blood seeping through her white shirt. Stark and shocking, she had been shot. I saw Josephine's pale face, and before my mind could react, I had already lifted her and carried her back inside. Then quickly locked the door. Now, with Xiao Hui and the dead man on the rooftop, and Xiao Hui having the key, the rooftop door could only be opened from the inside, posing no threat to us. However, we didn't know if they had any other companions, so naturally, we wouldn't stay on the rooftop to be easy targets. Seeing Josephine still bleeding from her wound, my mind buzzed. I hurriedly ran back to room 2801 to find some bandages. In my rush, I tripped over the doorstep and fell hard on the floor. Tears sprang from my eyes, but I still got up and continued running. In my haste, I grabbed a roll of bandages and ran upstairs, knocking over several supply boxes along the way without caring. At the top of the stairs, I saw Josephine pressing on her wound trying to stop the bleeding, with Catherine supporting her by her side, the man's handgun nearby, breathless. I handed over the bandages without a second's delay, and then blurted out, "Why did you bring this thing back? This gun seems to be a toy gun that's been modified. It needs to be reloaded after every shot. It's not much use to us. I've dismantled it," Catherine explained. I nodded slightly. In the deep winter, with temperatures dropping to -10 degrees Celsius, Josephine definitely couldn't stay on the rooftop for long. Following her instructions, we bandaged her up and helped her back to her room. I was fully aware of Josephine's condition, yet my heart still couldn't face the possibility that she might die. After helping her to lie down on her bed, Catherine and I returned to the stairwell entrance. After waiting for a long time and confirming that they had no other companions, we cautiously opened the door only to see Xiao Hui sobbing as he lay on the man's corpse. "Uncle, uncle," he cried. Then he heard our footsteps heading towards the rooftop and turned back to look at us with resentful eyes. Catherine scoffed coldly, grabbed him, and dragged him downstairs. Her movements were rough. With every flight of stairs, his head banged against the tiles, yet he endured without making a sound. Catherine dragged him all the way to the fire door, pulled it open, and threw him out. Xiao Hui panicked. He wanted to live. The corridor outside the fire door was filled with advanced zombies, and he didn't want to die, so he hurriedly crawled back, freeing one hand from the ropes and desperately clinging to the fire door. No, don't. I don't want to die. Don't drive me away." Before he could finish speaking, Catherine slammed the door shut emotionlessly, and from outside came Xiao Hui's howls as his fingers suffered a crush fracture. He hadn't expected Catherine to actually have the heart to close the door. He felt even more resentful as he painfully withdrew his hand, which was now severely swollen and numb, completely immobilized. I thought for a moment, then took some food and a wooden stick from the storeroom and put them in a pouch along with a map Catherine had drawn. I opened the fire door, threw them out, and quickly shut it again. "I've prepared 5 days' worth of food and a simple weapon for you. Look at that map. Follow the highway south of the city and head east. About 30 kilometers away, there's a survivor's base where you can seek refuge." I spoke to him through the door. He suddenly looked up. his eyes still full of lingering hatred and astonishment. "You can only choose to trust me. No one will let you in here. Staying here, you're surely going to die. You might as well take my advice and try for a chance to live." After saying that, I turned and went back to room 2802, sitting beside the now unconscious Josephine, holding her slightly cold hand. I recalled the recent events, a chill rising in my eyes. I am no saint, nor did I truly intend to save Xiao Hui. On the contrary, I wished he would just die. But just as I was about to leave, I suddenly remembered the day that fully armed squad was wiped out, and the look in that woman's eyes I saw through the high-powered binoculars. Xiao Hui's eyes on the rooftop eerily mirrored the ones I had just seen. From the day we survived that ordeal, I knew that you should never corner a living person, no matter how weak they may be. It's always an incredibly foolish act. The fundamental instinct of any life is to survive. Depriving them of the right to live will inevitably bring about a fierce backlash. If I were Xiao Hui, with my uncle dead, our plan to seize supplies failed, the suppliers hating me to the core, and no hope left for survival, I would see only one path ahead: death. I can't decide whether to live or die, but I can choose how to die. For example, trying everything possible to take those with the supplies down with me. If I can't live, then let's die together. I never expect Xiao Hui to have a change of heart, nor do I expect him to remain calm and analytical. At this point, blinded by hatred and despair, it wouldn't be surprising what he might do. Ultimately, Xiao Hui might not be able to take us down with him, but he would certainly affect us. From my perspective, I wish for his death and hope to survive myself. However, we can't kill him directly, so to minimize risk, there's a low-cost and simple method, that is to provide him with a new option before he chooses between dying alone and dying together. To live, as I said, the instinct of life is to survive. He hates us for killing his uncle, but he can't resist the allure of living. Of course, I'm not kind-hearted enough to let him truly survive. Catherine's map was drawn 2 months ago based on her intuition. It indeed showed a survivor base built along the eastern coast, but even if Xiao Hui is lucky enough not to die on the way, by the time he actually reaches it, the base will likely have fallen into a ruin overrun with zombies. At that moment, in hell, he'll realize that there were never two paths to choose from. He's still headed for a dead end. This time, however, Xiao Hui, miles away, can no longer affect us. I watched over Josephine with Catherine for an entire night. When she developed a high fever in the evening, burning hot all over, Catherine and I took turns wiping her down with alcohol to cool her off until the fever finally broke in the early morning. Exhausted, I took a moment to check the fire door in the hallway. As expected, Xiao Hui had left. After several hours of busyness, I saw Catherine yawn 3 or 4 times. So I told her to rest first. I wasn't sleepy yet, so I continued to take care of Josephine. The winter night was very quiet. Feeling a bit cold, I turned up the heater and switched on the corner fan heater to silent mode, then lay down by the bed. There was always a lot on my mind during the day, but at night, I wasn't that sleepy. I checked Josephine's abdominal wound. The bleeding had mostly stopped, but a faint redness was still visible from outside. I worried about whether to remove the bullet, but only Josephine, with her medical background, could make that call. Now that she was unconscious, these thoughts seemed pointless. Finally feeling a bit sleepy, I yawned, propped my head up, and looked at Josephine. The moonlight cast a silvery glow on her face, highlighting her soft facial contours in the moonlight. Leaning over the bed, I unknowingly fell asleep. Throughout the night, I woke up occasionally, touched Josephine's forehead, and changed her towel, thus spending the night. The next day, Josephine woke up from her coma, and Catherine woke up too. We asked her how she felt and saw Josephine, pale and weak from blood loss, smile faintly. The bullet didn't hit anything vital. I'm fine. But looking at her, she didn't seem fine at all, which worried me. We fed her glucose and watched as she slowly sipped the glucose water. Catherine also brought me some berry bread. After eating several slices, my mouth felt incredibly dry. I struggled to swallow the dry bread and felt better only after taking a sip of water. I jokingly said to Josephine, "Look, without you, all we have is dry bread. You've been feeding us for nearly 2 years. We're almost like helpless giants, completely forgetting how to cook." Josephine smiled at me, her eyes curving warmly. You guys, it was as if she was indulgently spoiling us like a gentle older sister during these moments. With my head down and eyes dry, I murmured, "Can you get better soon? I miss your dumplings." Josephine didn't say a word, just smiled. Last night, I didn't sleep well and was both tired and sleepy, barely making it through 20 minutes before I couldn't hold up any longer. After saying goodbye to Catherine, I went back to my room and fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. When I woke up, it was already night. I felt sore all over, but my mind was much clearer. Upon entering Josephine's room, I found Catherine had already fallen asleep at the edge of the bed, while Josephine was leaning against the headboard, lost in thought. I tapped Catherine's shoulder. Catherine, go back to bed. She was a light sleeper and woke up almost as soon as I touched her. Seeing me, she nodded wearily and left Josephine's room. I took a seat and looked at Josephine. What are you thinking about? She shook her head, saying nothing. I touched her forehead. She still had a low fever, which had been coming and going all day, without turning on the light. I walked to the window and gently pulled the curtains open, revealing the deep, dense night outside. Jade, I heard Josephine call me. I turned around and saw her face covered in tears. In that moment, it felt as if a string in my heart had snapped. I rushed to her bedside, and my own tears began to fall, leaving wet marks on the sheets. Josephine said nothing, but I understood everything. It was 3:30 a.m. when I was changing Josephine's bandages. I found them stuck to the wound, making it painful and difficult to remove. But Josephine waited silently until I finished wrapping her with fresh ones. Her fever was gone, and her body temperature was 36.7 degrees. She seemed a bit better. Jade, I'm a bit hungry. Josephine looked at me expectantly, and I sighed, resigned to go to the kitchen to make her some porridge. My cooking skills were average, but fortunately, millet porridge was simple to make. It was ready soon, and I fed it to Josephine, who ate it all, after returning the bowl to the kitchen. I came back to find Josephine patting the space beside her on the bed, signaling me to sit down. I complied, but she was silent for a while. Then she spoke. Jade, I promised you I'd keep living. I'm sorry. I might have to break that promise. I fell silent. Had I really forgotten? That night I got drunk and cried to Josephine. Did you say we should live well? Don't I remember? I do remember, but I'd rather forget. An indescribable, immense sadness overwhelms me, and the pain almost suffocates me. I hear her say, but Jade, I miss my grandma. She says, Jade, I want to go home. I carefully wrap my arms around her, and before I realize it, tears have covered my face. I shouldn't be so sad. From the moment Josephine was shot, I knew that with our current medical conditions, it was very likely she wouldn't survive. I thought I was prepared for her departure, but when this moment actually comes, I find that I still want to keep her, at any cost. Josephine gently hugs me back. Her embrace is warm as the many times before, but I've never felt as panicked as I do now. Josephine, she looks up at me, and I hear myself softly say, let me sing for you. This scene feels familiar, but I can't remember where I've seen it before, can't remember, or don't want to think about it. It doesn't matter anymore. Josephine is stunned for a moment, seemingly not expecting me to say this. After a long pause, she nods. Okay, struggling to keep my voice steady and choking back sobs. I sing to her. The little boat rocks, rocks and rocks, rocking to the bay on the other side. The little boat sways, sways and sways, swaying to the distant homeland. The first time Josephine sang this song was during our first New Year together, back then. We hadn't met Catherine yet. Josephine was there, and so was June. I chuckle softly, not knowing when memories of June became so distant, but that New Year, I remember clearly. I remember the three of us sitting around a small table, drinking together, Josephine's beautiful singing, and June's guitar playing. It's been so long since then. I gently pat Josephine's back as she lies in my arms, her breathing becoming slower, as if she's fallen asleep. But I feel a few drops of cold liquid falling on my arm. I don't stop, and continue singing. I look up from the mountains. I drift in the great river. I wander in the boundless ocean. In a haze, I return to my homeland. I look up from the mountains. I drift in the great river. I wander in the boundless ocean. In a haze, I return to my homeland. Time passes, and a hint of daylight breaks in the distance. Josephine's body gradually grows colder. I pull a blanket from the foot of the bed and cover her with it. When I open the door and step out, I find the living room in darkness, all the curtains tightly drawn. Catherine sits alone at the table on a mat, with only a small candle lit. In the flickering light, I see her tear-streaked face, her eyes glistening with tears. I quietly walk over and gently wipe the tears from her face. Catherine just looks at me, silent. Her tears flowing again. I walk to the balcony, pull all the curtains open in one swift motion, and look outside. Another radiant sun rises slowly from the dark green mountains, coloring half the sky in golden red, with countless rays piercing through the clouds, tearing apart the dark, dense night. The brilliant sunlight flows, stinging my eyes. Tears uncontrollably spill from my eyes, dropping to the floor with a splash, flowing to places unknown. I don't look back after speaking with her. I said, it's dawn, following that day. Catherine seemed to have grown up considerably, transforming almost overnight into someone resembling the savior who had once saved the world in my memory. Catherine learned to cook, becoming calmer, wiser, and more composed. Sometimes, I would almost forget she was only 20 years old. The house was often eerily quiet, which I found unsettling, so I would seek out Catherine for conversation. However, there wasn't much time for that. My days were filled with inventory checks and cleaning. While she took care of scouting our surroundings and cooking, life would have continued this way, day by day, until winter gave way to spring, a season that should have brought warmth, yet the temperature continued to drop. When Catherine and I turned on all the heaters but still shivered under thick down comforters, I realized that my prophetic dreams might have completely failed. We were living in an apocalypse, like a small boat struggling against a violent storm and tumultuous seas. So insignificant, yet our desire to traverse this vast ocean was incredibly strong. We needed to survive. On March 9th, following several days of cooling, the temperature plummeted, leading to a sudden downpour. The rain caught us off guard while Catherine and I were loosening the frozen ground on the rooftop. The sky, previously clear, darkened suddenly, and within seconds, the rain poured down heavily, soaking us before we could react. In such cold weather, being wet could be dangerous. We hurried inside, still shivering and sneezing repeatedly. Catherine wrapped a blanket around me and quickly wrung out her clothes before slipping on a raincoat and heading back out. From the doorway of the rooftop, I watched her swift, blue-gray silhouette move through the corridor to the rooftop of building 2801. Through the relentless downpour, I could barely make out Catherine carefully opening the rain collector. It hadn't rained in a long while, and the barrel was nearly empty. Not wanting to waste a single moment, she swiftly expanded the collector, monopolizing the surrounding rainwater into our barrel. After setting everything up, she quickly returned, the heavy raindrops painfully hitting her. As soon as she stepped inside, I closed the door, and we both went back to our apartment. She shook off her raincoat and hung it on the rack by the door. I stood at the window, watching the torrential rain hit the ground, the view outside shrouded in a gray haze. Visibility severely limited, being on a high floor, the rain curtain obscured everything even more. Catherine stood beside me and said, "Such heavy rain, Jade, how long do you think it will last?" Usually, such intense rain wouldn't last long, but seeing that after several minutes there was no sign of it weakening, I anxiously said, "I have a feeling this isn't just a simple rainfall." Little did I know, my words would soon come true. Today is the second day of the heavy rain. Upon waking up, I saw that it was still raining, and now a strong wind had picked up. We risked a quick look on the rooftop and saw water had accumulated up to our ankles. Currently, we had no better way to drain the water, and we were constantly worried that the soil on our rooftop might be washed away. We also had a restless night. On the third day of the rain, this morning, as I got out of bed, still groggy, I stepped into water, which gave me quite a shock. I quickly put on my raincoat and boots and went out to check the situation. The living room had water up to the depth of a knuckle, but the hallway outside the door was even worse, with water covering the tops of my feet. It was clear now, the water in the house had seeped in through the front door. Ignoring that for the moment, I nearly fought my way upstream on the staircase, struggling with each step, until I finally reached the rooftop. As I opened the door, a massive rush of water burst out from behind it, nearly knocking me over with its force, and the raging wind mixed with heavy rain immediately hit me full force. The water flooded into the hallway like a dam had burst, and I struggled to shut the door, using almost all the strength I could muster. When I finally managed to close the door, I saw that the water on the rooftop was already knee-high, almost level with my thighs. The strong wind and heavy rain nearly pinned me against the door, immobilizing me. The area was deeply flooded, with turbulent waves, turning it into a vast ocean. Catherine was already dealing with the water, scooping it with a large bucket and dumping it down to the lower floors. She then yelled at me, "Jade, grab a bucket and help me." My raincoat flapped loudly in the wind, clinging to me, while the rain painfully pelted down on me. My rain boots, which only reached my calves, were now submerged above my knees, filled with water, making it even harder to walk. I decided to just throw off my boots, tucking them under my arm. Though still cumbersome, this made moving a bit easier. I made my way to the rooftop of building 2801. The solar panels here couldn't afford to be flooded, but fortunately, due to the rain collectors, there was much less water accumulated here. Additionally, the higher elevation meant the water flowed to the other side, leaving only a shallow layer. I could finally catch my breath here. My fleece pajama pants, heavy with water, clung coldly to my legs, causing some discomfort, so I just rolled up the legs. Next, I grabbed a bucket and joined Catherine in scooping the water. After several hours of battling the rain, the water level finally began to recede, due to exhaustion and prolonged effort. I let my guard down and accidentally slipped in the storm, quickly getting up before Catherine could see, and continued scooping water as if nothing had happened. When the water level dropped to my ankles, I suddenly felt something was off. There was a faint red seeping into the water at my feet. Lifting my foot, I noticed a sock torn and a half-foot-long gash running from my sole up to my calf. Looking up, I met Catherine's solemn gaze. I swallowed, suddenly feeling very guilty. I stared down at my right leg, which Catherine had bandaged up like a rice dumpling, feeling like a child who had done something wrong. Then it suddenly hit me, wait, I'm 4 years older than Catherine. Technically, I'm her older sister. So, with a mix of sadness and indignation, I raised my head to meet her expressionless face. But then, feeling deflated like a punctured balloon, I lowered my head again in grievance. Tell me, Jade, what happened? Catherine asked coldly. I shivered. I fell while scooping water. My voice trailed off, growing quieter as I saw her expression darken. She opened her mouth, probably to call me foolish, but for some reason, she held back, shrinking back a little. I feared I might actually make her sick with frustration. Tentatively, I ventured, Catherine. Suddenly, she stepped forward and embraced me. Taken aback, I hesitantly returned the hug. Catherine tightened her arms around me. Her voice choked with emotion. Jade, don't leave me. Please don't die, okay? I paused and smiled somewhat helplessly, saying only, you also need to take good care of yourself. I was injured, so in the afternoon I had no choice but to let Catherine go to the rooftop alone to scoop water to prevent our home from flooding. I felt somewhat guilty, but fortunately, by the afternoon, although it was still overcast, the torrential rain that had lasted for 3 days finally eased. Also, due to the long-neglected drainage system in this apocalyptic city, the accumulated rainwater on the ground was at least 4 to 5 meters deep. Overnight, a thin layer of ice even formed on it. I had never seen water levels so high before. Once the rain stopped, Catherine was completely exhausted. She immediately took off her shoes and clothes and threw herself into bed. However, after resting for a short while, she resignedly got up again and started to clean up the water that had collected in both the living room and the bedroom, and me, due to my injury, I couldn't do anything. I sighed, reached for the bandages and ointment on the nightstand, and began to dress my wounds. On March 14th, the weather cleared up and the temperature rose sharply. I could barely hop out of bed on one foot, and I was getting restless. The temperature was now suitable for sowing seeds, so besides reading ebooks, my greatest pleasure each day was hobbling with a makeshift cane to the rooftop to watch Catherine tend to the crops. The soil here had been diluted into mud by the rain and scooped away by Catherine. Now that the water level had receded, only a thin layer of soil and about a finger's depth of water remained. Catherine moved several bags of soil from room 2801, spread out a thick new layer, and replanted it with fast-growing vegetables. I watched intently. When lunchtime came, Catherine helped me slowly hop down the stairs and back into our room. For lunch, we had cabbage tofu soup and stewed fish. Catherine was already very familiar with the stove. Her cooking was quick and her skills had improved rapidly. I ate until I was stuffed, opened my computer, but didn't know what to do next, so I just watched a movie with Catherine. It was a light-hearted school comedy that had us nearly laughing our bellies sore. After it ended, Catherine excitedly shared some amusing stories from her high school days, from her classmate drawing turtles on draft paper during midterms, chased by the principal with a thermos in hand, to their middle-aged, greasy class teacher mixing with the cheerleading girls during the sports day, dancing with a banner. We both had a great laugh. Then Catherine paused, smiled, and sighed. Things before the apocalypse seemed so distant now. I was dissatisfied with her quickly reverting to her previously overburdened demeanor. I vigorously rubbed her face, causing her to look at me annoyedly. I then said with a smile, "That's more like it, Catherine. You're only 20 years old. Don't keep a straight face all the time." I didn't want her to become the stereotypical savior of the previous generation, as even a wandering soul like me found that kind of solemnity dull. At such a young age, she seemed to exude a lifelessness, but I hoped she could always remain lively and spirited. The consecutive deaths of Josephine and June had saddened me deeply, but I had to force myself to move forward and pull Catherine out as well. We have to survive. We must keep living. Perhaps my words had an effect, for Catherine's mood improved significantly, and her eyes sparkled with more vivacity. She even picked up her long-unused paintbrush and resumed painting. This time, she painted a sun-drenched hillside with a cool stream in front, where animals came to drink. Behind it were layers of dark green mountains. Catherine's paintings were always beautiful, not confined to brushwork or technique, but each tiny stroke reflected her deep love for all these things. She told me, "Jade, when I was in college, I always hoped that after graduating, I could carry my sketchpad and see all the beautiful landscapes and plants around the world. What you read in books is definitely different from seeing them in person. I want to go and see. Plants or animals, including us, are all miracles created by nature. I could spend my entire life traveling around the world, capturing and documenting its stunning beauty to share with others." And then, the apocalypse happened. Her mood visibly darkened before she steadied herself with resolve. "Jade, let's survive this and go see it together, okay?" Gazing into her deep, clear eyes, I nodded. April 21st. A very bad day. My foot injury hasn't healed. And with temperatures soaring close to 30 degrees, the rain that fell a month and a half ago has almost completely evaporated under the relentless sun. Not a single cloudy day in this last month and a half, which is quite strange. The water evaporates quickly, and our small garden requires much more water. Catherine, worried about our water reserves, covered it with a plastic film to significantly reduce evaporation. Inside, ice packs help maintain a comfortable temperature. But despite my careful maintenance and not even touching water, my foot has become infected. It's red and swollen from the sole to my calf, oozing pus mixed with blood. I have to change the bandages frequently and apply antiseptic and anti-inflammatory medication, and I dare not move recklessly in bed. I don't think much of it, but Catherine is very worried, seeing my listless spirit and poor appetite. She even made me a fish porridge today, which was deliciously fragrant, and I had a large bowl. I vaguely remember Josephine also making fish porridge. Just as I recalled this memory about her, I immediately stopped myself. These days, I've been avoiding recalling them. I can't afford to fall back into that emotional loop. Shifting slightly, the pain from the wound made me grimace, and I dared not move anymore, obediently finishing the porridge in my hand. June 1st, after a period of diligent treatment and rest, my foot has improved significantly, and the wound is starting to scab. Unable to sit still, and since today is Children's Day, I unraveled the cuff of a brand new knitted sweater, retrieved some yarn, and made a few small daisies for Catherine. I strung them into a bracelet as a Children's Day gift for her. When I handed it to her and saw her raise an eyebrow, I knew trouble was coming. Sure enough, she began, "These are daisies, I can barely tell, but what kind of daisies are they? You say they're small. But they're quite large for ground-hugging daisies. These petals are too round and short for seaside daisies, and they lack the serrated edges of German chamomile, which also has a flat center." Annoyed, I retorted, "Oh, come on, it's a gift and you're being picky. Can't you accept it's an oversized version of a daisy?" Catherine seemed to suppress a laugh. "Since when do daisies have 6 petals? Erg, Catherine, stop being annoying. Just take it back." I snatched the daisy bracelet back, swearing that giving a handmade flower to someone who studied botany was the dumbest thing I've ever done. "But Jade, you already gave it to me." She suddenly looked downcast, her voice filled with loss. "Geez, I've known her for nearly 2 years and she's never called me sister before." My heart softened instantly, and I thrust the bracelet back into her arms. All right, take it back. Don't be sad." Then she looked up, still looking pitiful. But the words that came out were incredibly annoying. Continuing the earlier topic, "Also, Jade, why didn't you even make the calyx? It looks so awkward." Ignoring my foot injury, I raised my fist in frustration towards her face. August 16th, the ground is still hot, and since the torrential rain that lasted 3 days, every day has been under the scorching sun without another drop of rain. Our last collected rainwater is running low, with only about a dozen barrels left. Catherine decided to go out on her own to scout for other houses, hoping to find some water. I wanted to help her, but I hadn't fully recovered from my injuries. Even if I went with her, my mobility issues would only slow her down, so I watched as Catherine broke a broomstick to make a makeshift spear by attaching a fruit knife to a suitable length of the handle, and she also took a gun and a sack with containers. "Don't worry, I'll be back safe," she assured me seriously before leaving in the morning. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. In the end, that was all I could muster in reply. Catherine returned home just after 1 a.m. I had stubbornly waited on the sofa for her, anxiously anticipating the outcome. Numerous times, I imagined what she might have experienced, but I dared not think of her encountering any mishaps. I tried to calm myself, but as the night deepened, my anxiety grew stronger, eventually overwhelming me to the verge of tears. When I heard a faint knock at the door, I leapt from the sofa, accidentally hitting my wound and hissing in pain. Limping to the door, I peered through the peephole to see a figure covered in dust and looking weary, but it was definitely Catherine. I hurriedly opened the door and checked her from head to toe. She was a mess, but uninjured, which finally put my mind at ease. The tension of nearly 20 hours melted away, and a flood of exhaustion and relief overwhelmed me. I embraced her, blurting out, "I was about to set up a memorial for you if you hadn't returned by 8 in the morning." Tears rolled down my cheeks uncontrollably. She hugged me back, reassuringly saying, "It's okay, I just got held up a bit on the way, but look, I'm back safe and sound." Catherine showed me what she had brought back, her expression tinged with disappointment. "This is all I could find. The nearby supplies have been thoroughly scavenged by other squads." Looking at what she brought, since we didn't need other supplies, Catherine had only managed to bring back some water, 6 or 7 unopened bottles of mineral water and half a barrel of purified water. These waters have been stored for years, not sure if they are still good, but I brought them anyway, she said, pouring them into our rainwater collector to minimize evaporation. We transferred the remaining water from the collector into a large barrel and brought it indoors. Now, we primarily use it to boil for cleansing and maintaining a semblance of normal life. I calculated that we had 12 large barrels of water, 7 bottles of mineral water, and the water in the rainwater collector left. If we rationed carefully, it might last another 3 to 4 months. We pinned our hopes on rain in the coming months. On September 22nd, my wound worsened again. More bizarrely this time, despite changing dressings daily and refraining from walking, it mysteriously became infected again. The antibacterial medication was futile, and I was back to relying on a crutch to walk, or even worse, feeling feeble and feverish all day. It's been 3 years, a survivor base had been established up north, and Catherine and I had planned to leave by mid-October and reach the base in H City by November. But now, due to the worsening of my injury, we had to postpone. Currently, our water supply is strictly for drinking. The small vegetable garden had long been abandoned, and we had to slaughter all the fish and chickens at once. From initially bathing with plentiful water to now skipping even basic cleansing, we have had to adapt. We prioritize eating food with higher water content, like the stored canned porridge, to minimize water consumption. However, up until now, we're left with only 7 bottles of mineral water and 3 jugs of water that Catherine brought back last time. These supplies will barely last us another month. To leave, or not to leave, there's no water left here or nearby. The artificial pond dried up a long time ago. Staying means certain death, but leaving doesn't guarantee survival either. Indeed, the car parked at the entrance of our community still has some gas, but it would only last about half a day. Definitely not enough to make it from our city to the distant H City base. A significant portion of the journey would have to be on foot. If both of us were quick on our feet, we could drive about half the distance as planned, then rest during the day and travel by night, avoiding zombies and others, walking for half a month to reach our destination. But now, that's not possible. I've severely slowed us down. There's no way my injuries will heal within a week, with my current pace. It might take a year to reach H City. Traveling with Catherine, I would only expose her position and drag her down. Given my current condition, even if I waited for my injuries to heal, it would take at least 3 months, but our water supply will at most last us 2 for a month, enough for Catherine and me for a month. But what if it were just one of us? She wouldn't abandon me. But what if I were to die? If I died, then Catherine could survive. From the beginning, I've been holding her back. If I were gone, Catherine would surely make it safely to H City. She's the savior, the hope of humanity. Her life is far more valuable than mine. Suddenly snapping out of my daze, I sat up in bed and slapped myself hard. How could I think such things? There must be a way for both of us to survive. I've fought so hard in this life just to live. The simplest solution is for me to die, but I still have so much left to do. I'm still so young. I don't want to die. I want to live. There must be a way, no matter how hard. I'm willing to try. There must be one, I murmured, trying to convince myself, though my voice trembled. September 29th, Jade. When Catherine held up her drawing in front of me, I paused in surprise. For the first time, there was a person in her painting. On the desk by the window were pens and paper, and a girl was pushing the window open to a brightly sunny spring day. Outside, the tree branches were lush and vibrant with life. This person is you, Catherine said with a smile. It's from a dream I had. I'm not great at drawing people, so I chose to depict you from behind. I touched the paper, feeling the warm rush of spring air, and my lips curved into a slight smile. It's beautiful. My voice was very soft. Jade. Catherine stood tiredly by my bed. Your fever has been getting worse these past few days. I'm fine. My body felt heavy, but my mind was clear. I popped some antipyretic and anti-inflammatory pills into my mouth and drank from the water glass with a gulp. I gently set the glass on the bedside table. Catherine, go back to sleep. I've taken my medicine and need to rest now. Good night. Catherine looked at my face. Tomorrow, we'll leave. We can find water in cars along the way. Once we get to the base, we'll stay there until this apocalypse is over. Okay. I softly agreed. She left my bedroom. I patiently waited until the darkness of the night deepened and it was well past midnight. I picked up the cup of water from the table, gently lifting it. Untouched, I limped to the place in the living room where we stored water, pain shooting through my injured foot. Despite the agony from the inflamed wound being squeezed, I maintained a normal walking posture, nearly breaking into tears from the pain, enduring the pain. I gently opened the lid of the bottled water and poured back the water Catherine had prepared for our journey tomorrow. As the cold water spilled, a chill ran through me, making my teeth chatter. These were the supplies she had packed for our trip, but I could no longer accompany her. I was going to die. This was the path I chose for myself. I had never believed what Catherine said. The likelihood was that there would be no water along the way. And 3 years after the zombie outbreak, Any usable cars would have already been taken by other survivors. There would be no miracles on this journey. Catherine would be held back by me, and she wouldn't leave me behind, so we would both likely die on the road. I never depended on fate, nor did I believe fate would show me mercy. My life had been full of hardships, and everything I had was earned through my own efforts. If I died, it was on me for not being careful enough. For not being cautious. I couldn't blame anyone else. I returned to my room and fished out a pill from under the blanket that I hadn't swallowed, tossing it under the bed. Feeling around, something fell off. I lay down and peered under the bed. Aside from the pill I just placed, there was nothing else. There should have been dozens of pills I had thrown there. Sensing something, I turned around. Catherine stood at the bedroom door a few meters away, calling my name. Jade. How long were you planning to keep this from me? I was about to speak when everything went dark. Then I saw the figure at the bedroom door rushing towards me in panic, and I fell into a warm embrace. When I woke up, it was daylight. My foot no longer hurt, which made me happy. I knew I was going to be okay soon, feeling lighter, as if freed from some shackles. So light, it felt as if my soul could fly away. Jade. I turned my head and saw Catherine, her eyes red with bloodshot. Catherine. My voice was uncontrollable. And after several attempts, I managed to lift my hand with effort. I cradled her face and said with a seriousness I never had before, "Don't forget why I died." She paused, tears streaming down her face. She threw herself on me, hugging me tightly, and said, I know, I'll live well. I promise we'll both live well. Okay, Jade, don't leave. If you go, I'll be truly alone. Please don't leave me." A pang of pain struck my heart. Even though I knew my fate, it still felt unfair. If there really were gods in this world, could those lofty deities hear us, mere specks of dust, struggling so painfully? If this apocalypse had never happened, if we could all have lived, then perhaps everyone could be happy. June plans to establish a welfare home and help numerous people, potentially including children who, like me, lost their parents at a young age. She will be able to bring solace to lonely children by playing the guitar for them. Josephine aspires to be a doctor who saves lives and provides care. She will be able to rescue countless individuals suffering from terminal illnesses, offering them hope. Catherine could spend her life traveling across mountains and rivers with her sketchpad in hand, capturing the world's natural wonders and beauty. I, too, could study abroad at F University, continuing to pursue my passion. Everyone is inherently good, even if the apocalypse hadn't occurred, preventing us from ever meeting. We would still shine bright in our respective fields. I hear Catherine's painful sobs. Her voice is filled with such sorrow, like a desperate little creature's last cry, which saddens me too, my eyes burning with unshed tears. Yet I find myself unable to cry anymore. Let it be so. My Catherine will save this world. I believe in her. She will put an end to this apocalyptic world that has brought pain to everyone. I look up towards the window, watching the large snowflakes gently falling, beautiful like a dream. Catherine, look, it's snowing. This is the first precipitation this land has seen in a very long time. How long I can't remember, but I know that the remaining life on this land has been parched for too long, and this snow, like sweet rain, will nourish them and bring new hope for life. Winter will pass, and soon, a bright spring will arrive. Everything before me blurs, and the sounds around me fade into the distance. Through the haze, it seems I can see it. Swallows flying south return north. Vast fields of flowers bloom. It's the grandest, most vibrant spring. End of main text. Side story 1. Catherine's perspective. Caged bird. I no longer wish to recall how I came to be here. After arriving, I suffered from a high fever for a very long time. When I awoke, I found myself lost, unable to see a way forward. I didn't know what to do. The people I cared about were dead, yet I couldn't die, because someone had told me to keep living. She told me, "Don't forget what I died for." I know, I won't forget. She died so that I could live. She wanted me to survive. So, I lived. I worked in the plantation area of the base, day in, day out. But not long after, I stumbled upon some disgusting truths, that the people I loved were murdered. How could someone be so malicious? So easily destroying our home, as if it were fated. I exposed him and found important documents that could save people. Suddenly, I found my direction again. I could still save others, innocent people. I became a high-ranking official at this base, until today, when the apocalypse ended and everything was being rebuilt from the ruins. Even as I once again lost my sense of purpose, I remained in a high position here. My life is monotonous and dull, my days pale and repetitive, and it seems I can see the end of my life at a glance, unchangeable. Uninfluenced, everything operates on a preset track, and even if there's a slight deviation, it quickly returns in another form. Once again, I feel the irresistible force of fate. Even I, who saved everyone, am not exempt from suffering. I have dreams, and I know as long as they exist, the future won't be uncertain. But when I picked up the paintbrush again, I realized I could no longer paint the vibrant spring. I had lost my ability to perceive beauty. I had become numb and dull. Why is this so? It shouldn't be like this, should it? Therefore, I started to paint scenes of winter. The first time I picked up the brush, the pain was so intense that my whole body convulsed, and I knelt on the ground retching. This cold winter contained painful memories I never wanted to revisit, yet I persisted masochistically with each stroke. I spent a long time on this painting. After I finished, one of my subordinates, a young girl, saw it. She frowned at the painting. What's wrong? Is my painting not pleasing? I asked. It's not that. She hesitated, carefully choosing her words, then said, it's just very lonely, lifeless. It makes one feel sad and oppressed. I didn't respond, remaining silent until she left. Now, 3 years after the apocalypse, I've painted hundreds of winters. Nowadays, when I pick up the brush, my hand only trembles slightly. 3 years have passed, and people have rebuilt their communities and civilizations. Life is fragile yet resilient. Continuing from generation to generation, and spring arrives as promised, but I, who should have died in the winter, can no longer have a spring of my own, because the person I loved, the one who brought the only light into my dark life, the one who saved me from hell, died on a cold winter night, at dawn, and amidst a heavy snowfall. Looking up, I saw a poorly made daisy chain hanging high on the cabinet. It had only 6 petals. A long time ago, someone gave it to me. I gently smiled, thus. I confined myself forever to the cold, lonely winter. Spin-off 2, If Under the Same Moon. In a world where the corpse tide never happened, our lives briefly intersected, and afterwards, we never met again, but we both had distinctly different, yet equally bright futures. At the Gwendolyn Physics Awards ceremony, where the academic elite gathered to witness the rise of a new star in physics, I announced the winner of the 69th Gwendolyn Physics Award is Jade from Huagua. While giving her acceptance speech, Jade smiled brilliantly, and tears began to stream down her face. The path of research was tough and difficult, much like my life, but this award reassures me that steady effort always pays off. For this, I most want to thank my mentor who has always guided and supported me. As the sun set, June sat on a cushion inside her house, surrounded by children. She strummed her guitar, humming the tune gently. I know, Dean Mom. This is the Jiangnan folk song Boat. A little girl in a pink sweater excitedly raised her hand. June smiled and said, then do you know how to sing it? Sure, the little girl crisply replied. I'm not very good at singing. How about I play the piano and you sing? Meanwhile, on a nearby television, a reporter was interviewing June. You are so young, yet you've established the largest and most comprehensive orphanage in the world, helping many elderly and children. What made you choose this path? June, poised and elegant in the broadcast, smiled lightly and said, my father, in the nation's most renowned hospital. Josephine was smiling as she received a banner and heartfelt thanks from a patient's family. The banner read, Miraculous Healing, Serving the World. Her office walls were covered in similar banners with phrases like A Doctor's Benevolent Heart and Saving Lives with Boundless Love. Diligent and meticulous. Josephine had become the youngest director of the hospital in just 4 years. She once accurately decided to use high-dose radiation and performed an almost perfect surgery that saved a late-stage lung cancer patient, a feat nearly deemed impossible in the medical field. Director, a patient's family member wants to see you. All right, I'm on my way, she said, smiling as she took the banner and bid farewell to the family member. Catherine's painting fetched a high price of €1.02 million at an auction in France, and she remained unseen from start to finish. Already an internationally renowned artist with exhibitions around the world, her true identity remained a mystery. People knew her name, but hardly anyone had seen her face. Now, she was in a fjord in northern country N, setting up her easel and capturing the scene before her, the broad, clear, and calm river, the greenery on the mountains, the dazzling snow that adorned the unnamed majestic peaks year-round, and the pristine blue sky. She was like the most free-spirited wind among the mountain forests, unwilling to confine herself to the noisy clamor of fame and fortune. They had met once, on an ordinary afternoon, brushing shoulders at a street corner, just like all those unfamiliar strangers. Just a few steps forward, as if sensing something mysteriously, she suddenly turned back, but the other was already lost in the vast sea of people, nowhere to be found. Fate is such a peculiar thing. From that day on, they never met again in their lifetimes, yet they lived under the same moon, admiring the same bright orb. Extra Chapter 3, Jade's personal spring breeze moment. Today, with nothing much to do, I sat at the desk by the window, engrossed in solving formulas, and time flew by. Finally, I took a deep breath of relief. Glancing at the clock, it was already afternoon, and I stretched lazily, feeling a bit tired. Then, I looked out the window. The lush green leaves rustled in the breeze, layer upon layer, while the sunlight filtered through the gaps, casting mottled shadows. With the sound of the wind and the chirping of birds, life thrived outside. Unable to resist, I opened the window, and the gentle warmth of spring flooded into the room as I leaned out to welcome the spring breeze.